I've met a number of them, and I wouldn't mess with them. We're going to go on live on YouTube here, so we'll cut the political chatter.
Okay.
and the only reason for that is, hi YouTube, how you all doing tonight? We're about to kick off a brand new show here on the Mighty SOR. We're getting into the conspiracy theory tonight, and I was just explaining to our guest tonight, Marcus Allen, the reason why we kind of stay away from the whole political angle and what is going here is I like talking politics. Okay, being the former journalist that I am, I kind of enjoy that kind of discussion and debate. But the one thing that we have noticed, and we've polled our audience, Marcus, is they're using us as an escape. You know, they're using us to get away from the BS that they have to be put through on social media and regular media on a daily basis. So it's not that we don't like discussing the topics, it's we don't, because we absolutely love our audience more. And that's what they want, and that's where we're going with it, man.
Sounds the best way to go.
Yeah. We got a fellow Commonwealther on the air with us tonight from the homeland. Marcus Allen.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, from the UK, I live south of London near Gatwick Airport. If anybody's ever been into Gatwick Airport, it's closed now, of course, but there's 20 people flew out of there last week. It's ridiculous. Anyway, so yeah, just south of London, that's where I live.
Beautiful.
And dawn is just breaking. The sun is coming up. The world looks great.
You know what I find funny is the sun is just coming up for you. And where I live in British Columbia, and I live about near the central part of the province, the sun hasn't even gone down yet. And I just think that's so cool. So cool.
I think it just demonstrates that we live on a sphere, don't we?
Well, the flat earthers got this one wrong. That they do. It
wouldn't work otherwise. Yeah.
I want to give a shout out to everybody in our YouTube chat so far. We haven't even started the show, and there's 33 people in there. We got, hey Renee, how are you? Mary or Mayor? What the hell is your name? Person? And Wayland, how you doing? Gorgeous Jules, thank you for coming on in. How are you? Big Bad Alan Deegan, never go wrong with a Deegan, man. Hi, beautiful Eva. Always a pleasure to see you. Hi, Brett. Good to have you here. Oob to Joe's Maine. Your beard looks fantastic, even though you got aliens. Hey, Lord of Land, thanks for coming on in tonight. Really appreciate it. Chris Jarvis, good to have you back. And who else we got here? Nuck. We're getting one day closer to that hockey playoff, man. One day closer. Filth, you dirty bastard. How you doing tonight? Thank you for coming on in. I know we got Joker's Wild. Gary the Spudger. Don't mess with the Spudger, people. You just don't do that. That could give you a bad time. You don't want to mess with that. Triple M, Mr. Man, Mr. Good to have you here. The beautiful and gorgeous Marine. Michael Leger, thanks for coming on in. Mr. Apnea, good to see you. Ghost 66, how's your hauntings going along the famous route? Hope they are well. Okay, we're about a minute away from getting things going tonight. We're going to have some fun with our guest, Marcus Allen. And no, not the football player. Nope. This guy has talent elsewhere. Asteroid, thanks for coming on in. Philip Matlock, the Philip Matlock is here. All right. Where are we here? Guess I better get ready to tweet this. And because if I don't, then I'm going to miss it. And we don't want to be missing it. Where am I? There we go. All right, we got about 20 seconds here, my friend. Hey, Millennium, thanks for coming on in. Science Bob is here, everybody. Science Bob. Thanks for coming on in. Hope you got your cape on, Science Bob, because it's going to be a gooder tonight. Anthony Losapio, thank you for coming on in. Really appreciate you taking your time, man. I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you for rocking with us. Here we go, everybody. Music is on. We're going to have a great show. The Super Chat is open. Sponsor us by joining our Space Travelers Club on our website. You can do a little shopping at the SOR Vault. Thumbs up helps as well, so make sure you get that in there. And, Mark, we're going to get going here because I'm going to read an intro starting right now. From From the mountains of central British Columbia to you listening around the world, this, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. We welcome you to tonight's show on our terrestrial affiliates across North America and digitally on TalkStream Live and Revolution Radio. If you want to take a listen to our archives, they are free for you at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio for the show and my personal handle at Dave Scott SOR. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire and much more. Tonight's show is brought to you by Chive Charities. Help make the world 10% happier by visiting Chive Charities today. You can find them on our website. Over the years, many conspiracy theorists have made the claims that man has never ever landed on the moon. Why? It could be everything from the lack of technology at the time to the radiation of the Van Allen belt. Marcus Allen is the British distributor and publisher of the UK edition of Nexus Magazine. Nexus deals with news and information that is overlooked, unreported, or ignored by mainstream media. Like many others, Marcus watched the Apollo moon landings live on television, and at the time, he applauded the evidence and the success of those missions. But after attending a lecture a decade ago, he started to question the validity of the moon landings, and he decided to carry out his own research. What that is, we're going to find out here momentarily. Then at the bottom of hour number 3, I will bring you the SOR Newswire, brought to you by Paranormal Magazine. Mr. Marcus Allen, I know it is beautiful for a morning time for you as the sun is coming up. And I find it kind of funny because where you are in the United Kingdom, it is morning, sunrise just coming over from the east to the west, and yet where I live, the sun hasn't even set yet. I find that so interesting, my friend. The flat earthers don't know what the hell they're talking about.
I love it. Great one. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate your kind sentiments there. No, it's a great time to be alive right now. There's fascinating things happening, especially in space, and your station is well named, Spaced Out Radio, because that's where we're going to be going tonight, isn't it? We're going into space.
Well, you know what? We are going wherever you want to go tonight, my friend.
Well, let's start back here on dear old planet Earth. Let's go back in time to the early 1960s. Maybe a few of your audience were around at that time. I certainly was. I was driving a Land Rover to India, as it happened, in the early 1960s. Spent a year in Calcutta teaching. Came back to the UK for my 21st birthday and stayed here ever since. I've been trying to get out. In fact, I have been back to India. I've been to Japan and South Africa, so I've been around. But I've never been to North America, which is a big problem because a great deal of research and information, specifically about the Apollo program, is something I'd like to see on the ground, to see in real life. I'm sure there's a great deal I could learn. And it's something I always say, because I'm going to make a statement now, and if anybody can prove me wrong, I would like them to do so. The statement is very simple. No human has ever walked on the lunar surface.
That's pretty brazen. Kick off the show with that right off the bat.
That's where we're starting from. Now, how can I support that sort of antagonistic statement? Because those of us who were around at the time, and I was certainly one of them, and I'm sure a lot of your audience were, watched those famous landings on the moon on July the 20th, 1969, when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin climbed down from the lunar module, the Eagle, walked onto the lunar surface, and Armstrong made his famous statement, "That's one small step for a man, a giant leap for mankind." And we all believed him because we all saw it. We saw it live on television. This was live, don't forget. This wasn't recorded. This was live transmission from the lunar surface. And that's the first problem. How on earth did they do a live transmission from the lunar surface? Any electrical engineer can tell you quite easily how much power is required to transmit a signal, a radio signal, a TV signal here on Earth. And it's about 30,000 kilowatts. They didn't have 30,000 kilowatts. They had 3,000 watts. 3,000 watts, 3 kilowatts was available for the power. So that's the first problem. How on earth did they do that live transmission? Now, we all watched that, and everybody saw the same thing. So we all reckoned that it's part of our memories. Our memories say, yes, we watched that landing live on the moon, and we watched them come back, and three days later, July the 24th, they landed back in the Pacific on the end of their big parachutes, the red and white parachutes, and they were heroes, and they went around the world and met presidents and kings and prime ministers and popes and heads of this and heads of that. Of course it had to be real. You can't fake something like that. No, that was very real. All that was very real. And some of you may remember the famous discovery in the Rijksmuseum of the fake moon rock, which was alleged to have been presented to the then Prime Minister of Holland by Armstrong and Aldrin to commemorate their visit to Amsterdam in 1969. Unfortunately, they couldn't have presented any moon rock to anybody at that time. It was all still held in quarantine at Houston. So the whole story was a wonderful piece of fiction, because it turned out to be a piece of petrified wood. Very strange, that. So you got things like that crop up. These stories sort of come up over the years. That happened about 10 years ago.
Why did
Following the Apollo?
I just want to stop you there for a second. Why did you take such an interest in this? I mean, you watched it as a kid, you believed it. What 10 years ago, what lecture did you hear 10 years ago that changed your entire vision of what happened?
Okay, yeah, good point. It was actually about 25 years ago I heard this lecture. It was in Glastonbury, not at the music festival, though it's called the Glastonbury Music Festival. This was in Glastonbury town itself. There are many other things going on in Glastonbury. And one of them is a series of lectures which has been going on now for nearly 30 years. It's called the Glastonbury Symposium. Worth attending if you're ever near the UK. It's normally held at the end of July. Anyway, one of the talks here, we were talking about megaliths, or ancient structures. And the person giving the lecture was talking about all these weird and wonderful structures, and he was talking about the photographs, showing a lot of photographs. And almost as an aside, he said, well, of course, you've probably seen those photographs taken on the moon. Well, they weren't taken on the moon and couldn't have been taken on the moon. Now, he didn't expand any more than that, but it piqued my interest because I had studied photography following my trip out to India. I'd taken a lot of photographs out there. I wanted to find out more about the technical side of photography. So I went to college for a couple of years in London to study photography, specifically the technical side of it, not what photographs to take, but how film. Now, I'm talking about photographic film here. A lot of people won't even have seen a photographic film. But in the 1960s and 1970s, photographic film was what was used to record images. Nowadays, we use digital. We use CCD, close-coupled devices, in cameras. But in the 1960s, they hadn't been invented. So everybody had to use photographic film. Now, photographic film is a strip of plastic-backed gelatin, which is light-sensitive and records images by the amount of light that comes into the camera. You develop the film, and if you're using black and white, you develop it into a negative, and you then print that into a positive image to get the image that you'll then look at. So I wanted to know how to go about ensuring that I could use photographic film effectively. And I worked professionally in studios in London during the 60s, and it was a fascinating time. So this point about the photographs on the moon couldn't have been taken there, I thought, well, that's interesting, because I'd watched the landings live on my little black and white television in London, July the 20th, 1969, 3:30 in the morning it was. a lot of people will remember having watched that. So I was convinced at the time that what I was watching was for real. So when somebody questioned it, I thought, oh, that's interesting. I'll check these photographs out. I had to go out and buy a set of postcards because in the early 1990s, there wasn't such a thing as the internet. So I had to get a books or magazines and look at the photographs there. I started looking at them, and if you study photography, you'll know how light affects a subject. And you can start to back engineer a photograph. You can work out where the light was placed, how much light was there. If you know anything about photographic film, you know some of it is very sensitive to light, some of it is less sensitive, but it can record incredible detail. So I looked at the famous photographs of the Apollo 11, Buzz Aldrin climbing down the ladder from the Eagle, the lunar module. And I started saying, well, okay, I can see what this person might be referring to, because Buzz Aldrin is lit up like a Christmas tree in these photographs. And then you realize that he's actually climbing down in the shadow of the lunar lander, because the sun is the other side of the lander. Therefore, it's all in shadow. But he isn't. He's beautifully illuminated. It's a very good photograph. It shows you everything you want to see. And you can see all the detail in his spacesuit and the soles of his feet. And the more I looked at it, I thought, hang on a minute, there's something going on here, because I knew at that time that no auxiliary lighting had been taken on the Apollo missions. They were saving as much weight as they could. So what's the explanation for it? Oh, it's the sunlight being reflected off the super reflective surface of the moon. Well, on the face of it, that makes sense, until you start looking at it. Well, how much does the lunar surface reflect? And the answer is actually 8% of the light hitting it is reflected. So would 8% of the light hitting the lunar surface be enough to illuminate an astronaut wearing a white spacesuit and being recorded on photographic film, in this case Kodak Ektachrome transparency material? I knew from my own experience using Hasselblad cameras, which is what was being used, using Kodak Ektachrome film, how very sensitive it is to exposure. You have to get the exposure right or you ruin the shot. It's either too bright or it's too dark. I looked more at the photograph, and the directly illuminated surface of the moon, behind the spacecraft in this case, was not overexposed. But Aldrin was beautifully illuminated. And I thought, hang on a minute, there's a problem here. This photograph couldn't have been taken on the lunar surface. And I started looking at other ones, not just Apollo 11, but all the way through the other 6 missions that landed. And the more I looked at them, the more I realized that, yes, there were major problems with some of these photographs. They appear to show what I've subsequently discovered is actually a model. It's not on the lunar surface, because film, as anybody who's used it will know, is sensitive to light. That's the whole point of film. It's sensitive to light. You have to get the exposure correct to ensure that you get the picture that you want. So all this light on the moon will be quite bright. There's no cloud or atmosphere to dissipate it. So it's quite bright. So how did they get the exposures correct all the time? Because they did. The photographs, I've looked at virtually all the photographs. There are actually 5,771 photographs taken on the lunar surface by the 12 named astronauts, which is not a significantly large number of photographs, because it's quite easy to take photographs quite rapidly if you want to. Though the Hasselblad cameras were not automatic cameras. They were manually operated cameras, which is another thing. Once I discovered about that, I realized that, no, we've got a major problem here, because these Hasselblad cameras, they're extremely good cameras. There's no doubt about that. But they are not automatic cameras. They're not point-and-shoot camera. That's what we use today. You switch it on, point it, and shoot. And you get a good, well-exposed image, because the camera does all the work for you. On the moon, using the Hasselblad camera, you had to manually set the focus. You had to manually set the aperture setting, the F8, F11, F16, you had to manually set the shutter speed, 1/60th, 1/25th, 1/250th, and you didn't have a viewfinder because you couldn't, if you're wearing a spacesuit, you can't get your head down low enough to look through the viewfinder, which on a Hasselblad is on the top of the camera. And you're wearing armored gauntlets in your spacesuit, armored against micrometeorite impact. So with all these limitations of use, some of the most defining images of the 20th century were taken. They weren't taken on the moon, they were taken here on Earth under controlled studio conditions by professional photographers. And if anybody can prove me wrong on that, I'd like to know. Because in 25 years of researching the subject, I've yet to have anybody give me any convincing case, or even any case at all, to say that they were taken on the lunar surface. Because there are two major problems when you're taking photographs on the moon. One of them is the radiation. It's not just radiation in the Validity radiation belts which surround the Earth. They follow the lines of the magnetic field of the Earth, and they protect us from the radiation of space, as does our atmosphere. Once you're beyond the Validity belts, about 20,000 miles out, you're in what Neil Armstrong referred to as cislunar space. Basically the area of space between the Earth and the Moon, which is the same as the space that surrounds the solar system. In that space, you've got solar particle events, solar flares, radiation from the sun, and you've got galactic cosmic rays coming from deep space, all of which affect photographic film. And you can't protect a camera from the radiation of space. You might be able to protect it from the temperature, which is quite severe in space. It's well over 100 degrees centigrade, higher than the boiling point of water, if you're standing in the sun. And then you've got the major problem. I mean, radiation is quite a severe problem, but there's an even bigger problem in space. It's the vacuum of space. We don't have a vacuum here on Earth unless we create it. We're standing on Earth, and we have 14.7 pounds per square inch of atmospheric pressure above our heads, which is 8 tons per square meter, which is quite a lot. We don't notice it because it's coming from all sides, so we've got it inside us and outside us. It's the only way we affect it if we start driving our car too fast, and we stick our hand out the window and you'll get the hand blown black, because the atmosphere is quite dense. In space, there is no atmosphere. There's nothing. It's a vacuum. And a vacuum has severe effects on photographic film. It has severe effects on a lot of things, but we're just talking about photographic film. If you have ever done those experiments at school with a vacuum chamber, and you put a bowl of water in the vacuum chamber and you've created a vacuum, you'll notice the water starts to boil. Another word for that would be called outgassing. Any liquid will be boiled in a vacuum. And the other thing that happens in a vacuum, which is not really very well understood because we don't experience it very often here down on Earth, is called cold welding. Cold welding is, as its name implies, where you get two metals coming together and they will, in a vacuum, literally weld themselves together. It's caused by the outgassing of the lighter elements within whatever metal you've got, aluminium, magnesium, titanium, all of them outgas particles, and those intermingle if they're close to another piece of metal, and they in effect weld together. But there was no evidence of cold welding of these Hasselblad cameras, let alone the spacesuits. So we've got this major problem of the vacuum of space. We've got another huge problem of the radiation in space, but the photographs that we see taken on the lunar surface have no radiation damage to them at all. If you remember a few years ago when you went through airport security and you went to, they were using X-ray machines, you were always advised, if you had photographic film, to have them hand searched and not put through the machine, otherwise it would damage the film.
Right.
And you would normally protect them in a lead-lined box. So where are the lead-lined boxes on the moon? No, there weren't any. So there was no protection from the radiation of space on the photographic film, and there was certainly no protection from the vacuum of space, which would destroy film.
All right.
And so with all these problems, some of them, as I say, some of the most defining images of the 20th century were produced. Yes, they were produced here on Earth, not on the moon. That's the difficulty.
It's easy to dismiss what has been brought down as fact, as we only got about 2 minutes to go here before we got to go to break. Marcus Allen is our guest tonight. But nobody ever has come out publicly and stated that they were part of this photographic moon hoax.
No, they haven't. You're quite right. And there's a very good reason for that. Because very few of the people, there were 400,000 people working on the Apollo program at the height of it in 1966. And they were people working right across America, from Seattle, where Boeing were making the part of the Saturn V and the lunar rover, down to Lockheed and Martin, and over in Connecticut, where they were making the spacesuits, down to Houston, where they had the control center. All these people were working towards one aim, but they only did, and they only knew about the job they were employed to do. The people working in Seattle didn't know about the spacesuits. It wasn't their job to know about it. So you would get this, it's called compartmentalization. It's a military term where you know enough to do your own job. And that's all. That's all you need to know. We all watched the same thing. We all watched the same piece of film of the rockets taking off. Those were real. Rockets taking off were real. Where they went 2 minutes after they launched, we have to rely on NASA to tell us what happened next. And for the next, in the case of Apollo 11, the next 8 days. Well, if we don't believe that everything that NASA tells you is true, because it stands for never a straight answer or no astronaut sent anywhere, then you have to start researching it yourself and looking into the detailed paperwork and the work that was done by the people working on it to find out if it all adds up. And in my opinion, it does not add up. That does not mean that these people were lying. They were not. They did not know anything about this. They only knew what they were doing themselves. They watched it live on television, same as we did. They were very proud of what they had achieved.
Right. Marcus, I'm going to get you to hold that thought right there, because we're going to go to break here at the bottom of the hour. Marcus Allen is our guest tonight. Did the Apollo moon landings really happen? Or has it all been a long 50-year hoax? We'll find out more on Spaced Out Radio coming up. It's a solid first half hour, my friend. Solid first half hour.
Well, thanks, Dave. That's good. No, let's just say I've done a lot of work in this area. I do know what I'm talking about. Some people will say I don't. Some people will say I'm lying. Some people will say I make stupid mistakes. That may well be true.
Well, just remember, if you're ever around Buzz Aldrin, make sure you wear a hockey mask or something, so in case he decides to throw a punch at you, you're safe. You're okay. You're not going to take one.
Yeah, well, that's true. It's interesting. The guy he punched was Bart Sibrel. And Bart Sibrel has subsequently apologized to Buzz Aldrin for the way in which he confronted him, which is fair enough. But then, of course, Buzz Aldrin refused to swear on the Bible that he'd walked on the lunar surface, as did Neil Armstrong, which was a bit of a strange thing to do.
We'll get to that.
Yeah, okay.
I don't want to give too much out yet. I got to hold these listeners for 3 hours.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
That incident with Buzz Aldrin is always quite an amusing one to talk about.
Oh, we'll get into it. We definitely will get into it. That's for sure.
I think you're very professional at this, Dave. You know exactly what you need to do to hold your audience, which is important.
Well, it goes with time, right? You always got to give the tease. Always the tease.
Yes, good point. In fact, when you first contacted me, I thought, Dave Scott, I know that name. But of course, I was thinking of the astronaut at the time.
He stole it from me. Even though he's older than me, he stole it from me.
Well, in the same way that that footballer did to me, because I'm older than him.
Exactly. Go and make our name famous. Yeah,
it's good combination, that.
Oh yeah. Manly names. We have manly names.
Yes, important.
Yes. I agree, my friend. I fully agree.
Yeah. So what's your personal position on Apollo?
I think they landed. But I have some questions, and we'll get into this. I just like to believe, man. God, that opens up a whole different bracket here, man, with asking me that question.
Well, maybe you should ask it. Or maybe I should ask it of you.
I'll put it this way. I've been face to face with aliens. I believe almost everything now, man. I've been face to face with Bigfoot. I believe almost everything. I've been face to face with ghosts. I believe almost everything.
Well, we could have a discussion about where aliens actually come from, because I think they're much closer to us than we give them credit for. I think they live inside. I think they live in the moon. It's a wonderful place to live.
Been there?
But nobody can see them going. They're coming around the backside.
Well, I can say this, man. When I was before I even started this show, when I watched that spaceship, or felt that spaceship call me outside in my friend's back 40 at 10 o'clock at night, and I go back there and I ask it to turn its lights on for me, and it does. That's kind of life. That's kind of life altering. You know what I'm saying?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Same with me in crop circles. Well, you've heard of crop circles, haven't you?
Oh yeah.
And because I live in England, I've been able to get to quite a few of them. And it's always interesting when you create a shape that you would like to see appear in the field, and it does the next day or the next week. You think, hang on a minute, how did that happen? But that's happened more than one occasion. And when you see them appearing, when you see crop circles actually forming in front of you, and a few of them have actually been filmed as they formed, you think, hang on a minute, this is not a few drunks tipping out the pub at night and going out into the fields and creating them.
I never bought that story, because I can tell you right now, if I was drunk at the middle of the night and single, I'm trying to get laid. You know what I'm saying? I'm not hanging out with my buddies saying, let's go make some crop circles, man. Oh, that'll be fun. No way, man. It is last call. I am making every last ditch effort, if I'm single, to pick up and make sweet love to somebody. That's what I'm trying to do. And if not, I'm going home. Hold on, my friend. Hold on. Here we go.
Doubtradio.com.
Thank you to Bigfoot Michigan Rob and Cable Guy Matt for the super chats. Really appreciate that. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you're enjoying the show, or a thumbs down if you're not. And hit that bell thingy. I don't know what it does. And the subscribe button. That's what I'm supposed to say to you. So let's have fun here. Here we go. Second half hour of Spaced Out Radio is underway tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters as the sun begins to set here on the West Coast. Want to say hello to everybody listening in around the world, and remind you that if you miss portions of this show or others, you can check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/spaced out radio. Just do me the favor and hit that subscribe button. Our website, spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. And of course, follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio for the show, and my personal handle at Dave Scott SOR. We are talking about the moon landings. Did they happen? Did they not? From Nexus, we have Marcus Allen all the way over, joining us from the United Kingdom. We really appreciate you taking the time, Marcus.
Delighted to be able to do so.
Well, we're appreciative.
It's so nice to be able to speak to another part of Her Majesty's provinces.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Old Lizzie here, she means a lot to us here. You know, she does.
Well, yeah, she's a great lady. 94 she is. Oh, it's incredible. Absolutely incredible. She's still doing all the things she's meant to be doing.
I got a question. I got a question about that, if you don't mind. Okay, because there's a lot of conspiracy theorists out there who believe she's only made 94 years old, Queen Elizabeth, that is, because she is a reptilian who feeds off of the blood of virgin children. And this is where all the children go missing, is at Buckingham Palace. I mean, how far-fetched and how, in my opinion, dumb is that conspiracy theory?
That's dumb and stupid, and actually quite uninformed. Because if people were going missing around Buckingham Palace, I think it would be possible to have spotted it by now. The Queen has been the Queen since 1952, so we're talking a long time. And she may have made mistakes, not many, but losing children around Buckingham Palace is definitely not one of them. I've read all these stories because I'm well into a lot of these conspiracy theories, and that's basically what they are. They're theories about conspiracies. And anybody can come up with anything they like on it, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. There may well be truth behind some of them, but they don't involve the Queen. Certainly, in my view, they don't involve the Queen. Maybe I haven't done the right research, and somebody's going to be jumping up and down and saying, oh, he's just stupid, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Of course the Queen's involved. Well, how do you know? Where's the evidence? And that's the same with Apollo. Where's the evidence? If what I say is correct, that they didn't land on the moon, because they couldn't get there for a start, where's the evidence that they did land on the moon? Now, I've seen gorillas climb 80-foot gorillas climb the Empire State Building. I've seen dinosaurs chasing kids around kitchens in Jurassic Park. Is that real? Of course it's not. It's Hollywood at its finest. And Apollo is Hollywood at its finest. I'm not saying Hollywood was involved, because I can't prove it. But the film that we see, the Apollo record, and there's hundreds of hours of film, which you can go onto any number of websites and check out, has been deconstructed. And if anybody is interested in finding out the truth about how the Apollo hoax was perpetrated, or the film's part of it, there's a very good and very interesting and highly technical film called Make Believe, Smoke and Mirrors. It's 2 hours, 44 minutes long. When it was originally released about 5 years ago, the narrator of that film was so concerned that he didn't want to be identified that he disguised and distorted his voice to the extent you couldn't hear what he's saying. It's now been redubbed with a proper voiceover, and it's now available on a website, actually in Canada, called Apollo Detectives. So go on there, have a look at it, and see what you think. You'll see a few of my discussions with various people about it as well. Apollo Detectives on YouTube.
There are
film.
Oh, please go ahead. Sorry.
So, no, I was just going to say the film Make Believe, Smoke and Mirrors it's a highly technical film, and it looks at how all the effects were created. The slow motion, the apparent slow motion. It's not just filmed and then slowed down so it all appears slow motion. No, it's far more complex than that. It's different speeds at different distances. It's the use of models and mannequins to create the environment. It's a stage set, in effect. It's quite a big stage set, but it's a stage set nevertheless. It was filmed here on Earth under controlled conditions because it couldn't be filmed on the moon, because we've already covered the radiation problem affecting photographic film, and all Apollo missions were filmed. They weren't all video. And the still photographs taken by Hasselblad cameras, they were all films. And it's important to get the distinction between a film and a digital camera. Digital cameras didn't exist at the time of Apollo. How do we know that this is the case? How do we know that vacuum affects photographic film? Because that's hardly been mentioned as a problem. In fact, it's only in the last couple of years that it's actually come to be discussed at all, the effect of vacuum on photographic film. And that was a result of a lecture I attended here in London about 2 years ago, where the designer of the film cameras carried on the Hexagon spy satellite explained the details of his work. He was very proud of what he'd done. He designed and built the stereo cameras that were carried on the Hexagon reconnaissance satellite, let's call it, launched in 1971. And he mentioned, almost in passing, well, of course, the whole film had to be held in a pressurized container in the spacecraft, in the Hexagon spy satellite. I actually then asked the question, why was it pressurized? And he said, very simple. Photographic film cannot work unless it is under a degree of pressure, in this case, 1 pound per square inch. Not a great deal of pressure, the equivalent of flying at about 60,000 feet above Earth. That's 1 pound per square inch. At the top of Mount Everest, it's 5 pounds per square inch. That's the pressure in which, beyond which humans can't survive, because the pressure is not sufficient to force the oxygen into the lungs, against the back pressure of 14.7 pounds per square inch, which is the normal pressure inside the human body. So I asked him, I said, well, would pressurization be required to achieve the photographs we see on Apollo? He said, yes, of course they would. You can't use photographic film outside a pressurized environment. Now, the only other spacecraft that I was aware of at the time that used photographic film on the moon was the Lunar Orbiter craft, flying in 1966-67 to photograph potential landing sites for Apollo. That was real, it was unmanned, and it carried photographic film on board. The film was contained within a pressurized environment on the spacecraft. It's no secret. Once you find the schematics of the Lunar Orbiter and the Hexagon, you'll see it's identified, pressurized container. It's nitrogen gas they use to keep the pressure. On the Lunar Orbiter, they did use photographic film, and it was developed on board the spacecraft by a type of Polaroid system which used liquids which have to be pressurized, otherwise they outgas and boil and don't work. The film was then scanned, and the scanned image was transmitted back to Earth, where it was reassembled back to make the photographs. And I've seen several of the Lunar Orbiter photographs. They're quite good. They got very high definition, relatively high definition. And these are film. They're not digital, they're film. And those were the two craft that are used photographic film in space, and both of them had to have pressurization to ensure the film maintained its integrity and could be used. So if that's the case, these photographs of astronauts walking around on the lunar surface doing all sorts of things were taken with photographic film, but they weren't taken on the moon. They couldn't have been. The photographic film would not have worked. The cameras were not pressurized. Now, whether man landed on the moon is another question, which maybe we can come to later. But so far as the photographs are concerned, no, they weren't taken on the moon. That does not immediately follow that man did not walk on the moon.
I want to ask you this, sir, if you don't mind. And that is in regards to the technology that it took to get there. All right. I mean, it has been blown up over the last number of years that what we carry on our cell phone on a daily basis has more computers, more technology, more memory, more everything than the entire Apollo program had when they put their rockets into space. Now, I realize I am looking at this in a 21st century thought because I was not born when the Apollo missions were happening for the most part. I was born in 1973. And I don't really understand the whole technological side. But one thing I have noticed with a lot of people who are my age and younger, the one thing that we do is we try and put yesterday's understanding of technology and mix it with today's technology with what we know. And we cannot comprehend the difference of how men and women made things work back then comparatively to how they make things work now. There's a giant confusion about that I believe is out there. What is your thoughts on that?
That's an excellent point, because that more or less sums up the problems that we have. Everybody wants to believe Apollo happened, but you do have to go back to the time it happened, the mid to late 1960s, early 1970s, and look at the technology that was available to design the rockets, to design all the space suits, the control centers, the lunar rovers, all the technology that was used to allegedly get man to the moon. They actually used slide rules. You know what a slide rule is?
Yes.
Well, if you've seen a slide rule, in skilled hands, they're very, very good pieces of equipment. They're basically a form of calculator, but they are linear. And a slide rule is what it says, about a foot long, and it's got a sliding scale in it, and you can do all sorts of. To be honest, I haven't used one myself, and I'm a bit older than you are. So slide rules to me are a pretty ancient technology, but that was what was used to design the spacecraft. Slide rule. They didn't use computers. Forget computer-aided design. Forget it. Didn't exist. This is the 1960s. Things were very different. And as you say, it's very hard for people to get their head around the fact that cars did not have seat belts or airbags. They were extremely dangerous machines, actually, at the time. You could get killed in one very easily, not by just crashing into somebody, but by what was inside the car when you were thrown around during a relatively minor accident. You could get killed by it. Steering wheel was like a 6-inch nail pointing straight at your chest. But the technology that we have today is so far different, so far advanced from what we had just 50 years ago, 60 years ago, that if you're not familiar with it, it's very hard to get your head around the fact that that could have done what we are told it did. And I say that a great deal of it couldn't have happened, mainly because the technology was so primitive at the time that it was a miracle that even that 360-foot high Saturn V rocket, by the way, it's called a Saturn V rocket because it had 5 engines, took off, and 1 million people watched Apollo 11 take off, disappear from sight. So then what happened? And how do we know what happened? We know what happened because NASA tell us. They were the only people who had access to the communication. And we're suddenly being told that we could communicate from the moon to Earth with these astronauts driving around, on the case of Apollo 15, 16, 17, driving around in the lunar rover. And it appears the technology is advanced. And many people can understand advanced technology, but they can't understand primitive technology. And this is actually primitive technology. The computers on board the Apollo command module, known as the AGC, the Apollo Guidance Computer, was a very, very primitive, by today's standards, piece of equipment. It could do certain things. It could record certain events. Well, no, I say record. Record is the wrong word. It couldn't record anything. It didn't have the ability to record any information. The astronauts had to punch into it commands, which would then give an answer. But it couldn't then do anything. So the question arises, how on earth did they navigate? How did they get from the Earth to the moon? Well, you can see the moon, so you know where you're going. But there's a long distance between the Earth and the moon, 240,000 miles. How do you navigate across that distance? Now, any pilot, anybody who's flown an aircraft, will know that piloting and following a particular path with an aircraft is actually quite complicated. You have to have radio beacons. In the old days of aircraft, you just followed rivers and roads. And you just hoped it was the right river and the right road, and you get to where you wanted to get to. Today, you use radio beacons, and you tune into radio beacon, and you can navigate across considerable distances, even across oceans. But the Apollo craft were navigating across a vast amount of space which had no features, so you didn't know where you were going. They were told the computer did. No, the computer didn't. They were using a sextant. This is a 17th century device for taking star sightings if you're navigating across an ocean on a ship. They were using a sextant to line up on certain stars. Obviously, they know where the star is, and in relation to where you are, the star will tell you if you're on course or not. But it's very hard to change direction in space. You have to use rockets. You have to use a propulsion. And then we come on to Apollo 13. Oh dear. Oh, what a problem Apollo 13 is. Should we tell you the story of Apollo 13?
We got time. If you want to get into it and you feel you have this, let's get into it. We're already this deep into the pool. We need to do this now.
I think Apollo 13 is necessary because it's the outlier of the Apollo missions. There were 9 Apollo missions were sent to orbit the moon. Apollo 8 was the first one, totally untested. There'd be no test of the heat shield when it returned. Then you had Apollo 9, which was Earth orbit. Then you had Apollo 10, which is another orbit of the moon. Didn't land. Apollo 11 allegedly landed. Apollo 12 allegedly landed. And Apollo 13 didn't. Apollo 13 had an accident on the way. An oxygen tank exploded, we're told. That would have sent the craft so far off course, because every action has an equal and opposite reaction. If an oxygen tank exploded, it would be like firing a rocket. It would send it off in a different direction. But no, they didn't have a problem knowing where they were. They orbited around the back of the moon and landed back on Earth 8 days later, we're told. What we're not often told is the day after the official launch of Apollo 13, which was witnessed by many thousands of people, so it was for real. The day after that date was Saturday, April the 11th, 1970, Apollo 13. The day after Apollo 13 was officially launched, on April the 12th, in the Bay of Biscay, which is off the coast of France and Spain, it's about, say, a couple of thousand miles from Florida, where Apollo 11 launched. Off the coast of France and Spain in the Bay of Biscay, the Soviet Navy recovered an Apollo command capsule from the Atlantic Ocean. They took it back with them to Murmansk, where the Atlantic Fleet is based, and 6 months later they handed it over to America on the U.S. Coast Guard cutter, the South Wind, which was visiting Murmansk. What on earth was an Apollo command module doing floating in the Atlantic, being recovered by the Soviet Navy? Hadn't been reported missing. The official story is that it was what's called a boilerplate capsule, i.e. a practice capsule, not one that would go into space. But this is for real. There are photographs of it being recovered from the Atlantic Ocean, being taken to Murmansk, being handed over to the South Wind, and you can go and see it now if you're going to Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's on display outside their museum there. The official Apollo 13 command module, the one allegedly that had the accident and returned and all the astronauts survived and we all cheered and thought it was wonderful, is on display at the Kansas Cosmodrome. But you can't actually see inside it. you can't actually see very much. And the one at Grand Rapids, the alleged boilerplate, is sealed until the year 2076, the 300th anniversary of the founding of America. What's going on? Now, this was reported in the US military publication, The Stars and Stripes. It was also reported extensively in the Soviet Union, because they were quite proud of having recovered this thing. Now, if it was a practice capsule, let's say, and it had fallen off the side of a ship, and oh dear, it's drifting away, somebody will pick it up. Somebody might have said. It's a long way from Florida to the Bay of Biscay. How long would it take to drift there? 5-6 weeks, maybe? If it had drifted there would be barnacles and seaweed and all the stuff that you get when a ship is in the sea for too long. But there was none of that visible on it. It's as if it had just fallen off the side of a ship and been picked up the next day. Or came down from space. I'm not saying it's the official Apollo 13 command module, because I don't know. But I do think it is particularly weird that this command module, be it a boilerplate or a real capsule, which you can't see inside now because it's sealed, was recovered by the Soviet Navy. And they handed it back, because that's what you're supposed to do. If you find any nation's space artifacts, you hand it back to the nation that originated it. And that's what the Soviet Navy did. But it's very, very strange story, and the coincidences start to add up. Found the day after the official launch of Apollo 13 was way off course if it was for real. Because normally when you launch a rocket from Cape Canaveral, it will fly out over Africa. And the first thing you'll look out for, because you've been told if you're flying in a rocket, you'll look out for what's called the Eye of Africa. It's a very visible physical feature in Mauritania, in the deserts of Mauritania. It's about 20 kilometers in diameter. It's 3 concentric circles, hence the eye. Astronauts flying out would look out for it and say, at least we got to Africa, guys. Let's go on a bit. We'll get to India next and maybe South America. Then we're going round. But Mauritania is about 1,500 miles south of the Bay of Biscay. It doesn't add up. It makes no sense. But nobody's discussed it. NASA will not even address the issue. Right. So you've got these unexplained details all the time. And NASA have a habit of refusing to acknowledge it. And on that note, I'm gonna get you to hold on right there, because we are going to go to break here at the top of the hour, and I think it's important that we continue this discussion. Did the Apollo moon landings actually happen? We've all been told to say yes and believe yes, because that's what the books and video have showed us. But our guest tonight from Nexus in the UK, Marcus Allen, is presenting a very strong case against what we know historically. More with Marcus Allen on Spaced Out Radio coming up in hour number 2 next. My friend, I just got to run my dogs outside because I have a beautiful studio in my home. I'll be right back, okay? That's good. Yeah.
All right, we got about 6 minutes. 6 minutes.
6 minutes. Okay, I shall take a little check outside as well. That's a good idea.
Okay.
Hi there. This
right
is
back.
the paranormal lawyer, Michael W. Hall. I'd like to invite you to listen in each Sunday night, where we're going to open up your eyes to everything strange and paranormal. I will be hosting some great guests with topics that affect us all, such as UFOs, ghosts, and everything paranormal. Let's learn together on Spaced Out Radio Sunday with myself, Michael W. Hall, the paranormal lawyer at spacedoutradio.com.
Hey, space travelers, this is John Resig, founder of the Chive and Chive Charities. If you know anything about our website, you know we like to do things a little differently. We're not some faceless organization collecting money for a nebulous cause. Our donor dollars go directly toward life-improving items. Then we give those items directly to an underdog who needs it most. To become a donor with Spaced Out Radio's official charity, Chive Charities, just go to chivecharities.org/donate.
For the price of 1 cup of coffee a month, you can become an SOR Space Traveler. The Space Travelers Club is a place where you can interact with other listeners, either live during the show or on our great forum. We want your stories, pictures, comments, and ideas. You'll get live video streams, exclusive content, and be a part of our newsletter. Stay in touch with everything SOR. The Space Travelers Club is just $5 a month at spacedoutradio.com.
The SOR Vault is open for business, and do we have some cool swag for you to pick up? All you have to do is head over to our website and click on the SOR Vault. You have a variety of cool logos to choose from, and put them on anything you want. T-shirts, hoodies, hats, coffee mugs, you name it, we can get it to you. So do your shopping by supporting the story you love. Get your Spaced Out Radio swag at the SOR Vault today.
We all know on Spaced Out Radio we love a good beard and mustache, so why not take care of your facial hair with Mighty Moose Beard Oil? Made in Canada, we're taking care of beards and stashes around the world. We use 100% natural ingredients with our oils and balms to make your whiskers feel silky smooth. Use promo code SOR2019 at mightymoosebeard.com today.
I'm feeling a little spicy tonight. What to do? What to do?
Why not get Bumblefuck?
4 million Scoville units of pure hard rock. Bumblefoot hot sauces come in 3 flavors. The burning Bumble. Tone it down a bit with Bumblicious and throw the sauce on everything.
Spice it up. Bumble me, baby. Bumblefoot hot sauce. Get it today at kajans.com.
Are you an experiencer of something strange that can't be explained? Do you want help finding out what's going on? I'm Ryan Stacy, head of the Experiencer Support Association, otherwise known as TESSA. We've teamed up with Spaced Out Radio to investigate cases filled out in the SOR Sightlines report. We are independent and there's no cost to what we do. All we need is your experience. Let's find out what's happening together on the SOR Sightlines report.
Get your horns up with me on Spaced Out Radio. This is Ron Bumblefoot Thal. Come tune in to SOR where you can hear me rock out with Little Brother Is Watching, the official theme song of Spaced Out Radio. And then come on over to bumblefoot.com where you can find out about my tour schedule, my music, and everything else. Bumblefoot.com keeps you up to date on what I'm doing and the best way to stay in touch with my music and music camps. Sign up for my newsletter at bumblefoot.com and remember, Little Brother Is Watching.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
The party is always on at the Moose Vancouver. The Moose Vancouver is where you want to be when visiting Canada's West Coast. Open until 2 a.m. nightly, the Moose cranks up the rock while serving some of the
just
best.
Under 2 minutes here.
It's all right. Hope your dogs enjoyed the walk outside.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank goodness I got a fenced yard because when the deer are around, my dogs don't like deer around.
Why is that?
They're kind of protective of their territory.
Oh, right, yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Makes sense. The dogs can be quite protective. And of people
very much
as well.
So. Very much so.
That's good.
So what's
and
for
every time you come...
What's for breakfast this morning?
Oh, I haven't talked that far yet. I'm just having a bit of shortbread at the moment. If I sound a bit strange, just had coffee and shortbread, which is rather nice. I don't know. Probably have something pretty basic. Nice bit of scrambled eggs, something like that.
Very nice. Very nice.
Had a small lie down before I got online with you.
Oh, that's good.
So I probably won't have to go and have any more sleep today. I'll see how I go. Fortunately, I'm normally a night person anyway, so this is quite.
We only got about 10 seconds here, my friend. Hey, YouTube, we want to give a shout-out to Bigfoot Michigan Rob and Cable Guy Matt for the Super Chats tonight. A great way to support what we do is to give us a thumbs up, hit that bell, whatever that does, hit the subscribe button, and join our Space Travelers Club for $5 a month on our website, and do a little shopping at the SOR Vault. Here we go with hour number 2.
And on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show.
Second hour of Spaced Out Radio is underway tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. I am your host, Dave Scott, hanging out with all of you, and I am having a wonderful time. I hope you are as well. We say hello to everybody listening in on our terrestrial affiliates across North America and on the digital side on TalkStream Live and Revolution Radio. Remember, all of our archives are free at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Dyschromotopic. Dyschromotopic is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio for the show, and my personal handle at Dave Scott SOR. We are talking about the Apollo landings. We've always been told that what happened was that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were the first two men to walk on the moon. Number of astronauts did. However, our guest tonight from Nexus Magazine, Marcus Allen, is with us, and he is providing some very interesting facts that go against the grain of history. Marcus, welcome back.
Thank you, Dave. Good to be back. And hi to all those people listening. I hope you'll be able to provide some answers to what we're talking about. That man has never landed on the lunar surface, let alone return from it.
All right.
Very simple.
Let me ask you this right off the bat, if you don't mind. Do you believe we have put men and women into space?
Oh, yes, definitely. Definitely. Men and women have been into space since Yuri Gagarin allegedly flew the first orbit of the Earth in April 1961. Which was followed 6 weeks later by John Kennedy announcing in his address to the Joint Houses of Congress, we will land a man on the moon before the decade is out and return him safely to the Earth. At that point, no American had been into space. No American had been into orbit. John Glenn was the first American to orbit, and that was a year later. John Kennedy didn't know if it was possible to do it, but he was doing this as a political response to the considerable surprise that the Soviet Union had orbited Yuri Gagarin 6 weeks earlier. He had to be seen to do something about it. Now, don't forget, John Kennedy had only been in office since January of that year, 1961. He was inaugurated in January. He'd already had to deal with the Bay of Pigs fiasco, so his presidency got off to a bit of a shaky start. So he decided that he would put forward this idea of landing a man on the moon. It's just something which would gee up the American public after the ridiculous performance in Cuba, the Bay of Pigs. He didn't know if he could do it. Nobody knew they could do it. I mean, going to the moon was quite an undertaking, and this is the problem. So this is my challenge to your audience. If you can prove that humans have landed on the lunar surface and returned safely to Earth, I would love to hear it. Because in 25 years of research, I've yet to find that evidence. So if I've missed it, please advise me. Because going to the moon, there are three major problems which have to be overcome. You have to have a rocket to do it, the Saturn V rocket. We all saw it take off. 2 minutes after it took off, it disappeared from sight, and we have to rely on NASA to tell us what happened next. We have to get through the radiation problem, which NASA still admit today is a problem. The Soviet Union, or the Russian Federation as it is now, acknowledge that it is a problem. They've said so. And then the biggest problem of all is getting back, the re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere at the same speed you leave Earth at, is 25,000 miles an hour, i.e. very fast. you have to slow down and you use the atmospheric friction to remove the kinetic energy of the spacecraft and convert it into heat. So you need a heat shield to protect your capsule in which the astronauts are before the parachutes can open and they can drop into in this case, the Pacific Ocean. But how did that heat shield work under the conditions that we're told it did? Because the Apollo command modules returned on what's called a direct entry, i.e. they came straight in, whack, hit the atmosphere, slow down, parachutes open, splash, pick up, big heroes. That's how we're told it happened. The Soviets have never used direct entry. They use what's called skip entry, where they come in, bounce off the atmosphere to remove some of the speed, and then, having slowed down a bit, they can come in under a more controlled manner. And if you look at any spacecraft that returns from the space station, they're the only ones we can see nowadays, they don't come in at nearly the same speed. They come in at 17,500 miles an hour. That's the orbit speed of the ISS. So the returning capsules have to slow down, and they use heat shields on it, and the heat generated is much lower. It's a much less amount of heat at 17,500 miles an hour than at 25,000 miles an hour. And if you look at any of the Soyuz command capsules returning from the ISS, they're basically black from the heat generated and the soot created by the ablative material, which is a type of resin which destroys itself and protects the craft inside it. Now, there's something that you may have heard a little bit about. It's called the Orion capsule. This is Apollo 2.0, and it's going to be launched on whatever rocket they decide to put it on, the SLS, the Space Launch System, which is the only surviving part of the Constellation program, which was cancelled by Obama in 2010. The Space Launch System was retained by Congress because they had mandated that NASA should use an American rocket, because the only way they could get to the space station for a long time was using Russian rockets. And the only way they could launch very much into space was using Russian rocket engines, the RD-180s. Very, very successful engine. So what you've got here is a reliance on the Soviet Union, or the Russian Federation now, to reach the ISS. We've only just seen SpaceX take their Dragon capsule with 2 astronauts on board up to the space station successfully, which was a good thing to have seen. But when you've got this problem of returning from lunar orbit, which is not the same thing at all as returning from the space station, it's returning at 50% increase in speed, which if you use the inverse square law, you've got to have twice the protection. When the Orion capsule was tested in December 2014, i.e. 6 years ago, and don't forget Apollo only took 7.5 years from a standing start to landing on the moon, the Orion capsule almost failed, or the heat shield almost failed. So why didn't they just use what was successful on Apollo? Oh, they lost the formula. Oh, goodness, like they've lost the plans. They've lost so much of Apollo. They lost all the original films and the biometric data. Very careless, that. It's a ridiculous idea that they lost it. It probably never existed in the first place, which is why they can't find it. A great deal of the biometric data was allegedly found in a disused McDonald's restaurant somewhere in Louisiana, I think it was. They're not very careful about looking after their technology. So one has to question whether the technology exists. So that was my original challenge. If you can persuade me that the Apollo mission
here's my issue with that. Pardon me for cutting you off. I apologize. All right. But here's part of my argument with that. In the late 1950s, the United States government was developing the SR-71, which could fly at Mach 3.3 plus.
Yes.
And that full number was never, ever disclosed. It is still top secret to this day, which means that it was close to hypersonic speed. If not, could be hypersonic. We don't know. All right. So if we had the technology in 61 to fly an aircraft and create an aircraft of that magnitude and that speed at that altitude, which was well over 90,000 feet, why couldn't we turn that technology into rocket technology to boost ourselves into space and to make the run at the moon?
Well, that's a very logical conclusion to reach. But the SR-71 used a ramjet engine. It didn't use a rocket. It used basically a jet engine. As you say, it flew, I'm not sure it flew as high as 80,000 feet. It certainly flew very high, because that was its main defense against missiles being fired at it. I forget how many they said. It was 2,000 missiles were fired at the SR-71 over its 20-year period, and none of them hit it, which is obviously a successful mission. But it was an aeroplane. It wasn't a rocket. Yes, the technology had been developed, and it was an extremely advanced aircraft. It's probably the most beautiful aircraft ever designed. It was a fantastic machine. It could do incredible things. And ironically, one of the reports from the SR-71 ties in with the duplicity of NASA. One of the flights back, because they were flying over Vietnam in the early 1970s. And one of the flights back over the Pacific, they had to be refueled twice coming back over the Pacific to America. And they're probably very boring flights. So it didn't take very long, but it's quite boring. And one of the pilots said he wanted to just have a chance to look out at the canopy of stars above him. Now, flying at 70, 80,000 feet, the stars would be brilliant. So he switched off his cabin lights, which illuminated his flight control panels, just for a few seconds. And once his eyes had adapted to the dark, he said the starlight above was so bright it could illuminate my flight controls, which rather puts a different aspect to the story that he couldn't see stars in space. Of course you could see stars in space. They're all over the place. They're huge. There's a vast amount of stars. And when you're in space, there's no atmosphere to diffuse them. You can see anything. And the other point about space travel, proving Apollo's falsity, was some of the first space shuttles were flown. The first one was Columbia in 1981. Once the space shuttles had got their act together a bit, because it took 10 years to develop the space shuttle from the end of the Apollo era, you'd think they'd just stick the thing on top of a Saturn V rocket, but no, they had to develop a whole new propulsion system. Why? Why not just use what was successful with Apollo? It could lift more than the shuttle could lift, the shuttle launch system. The huge red fuel tank and the two external solid fuel rockets, solid fuel boosters, did not have the same power as the Saturn V rocket. Anyway, once they got the shuttle up there, astronauts had to work outside when they were launching satellites or they were doing work outside. The astronauts would complain every time the shuttle flew into the shadow of the Earth, and it spent half its time in the shadow of the Earth, i.e. no heat. They complained that their hands got cold. So cold they couldn't work. And NASA said, "Oh, so stupid, of course you can work, just get on with it." They said, no, seriously, this is very cold up here, because in the shadow of the Earth, there's no heat, there's no radiant energy of the sun, and for half the orbit, they're in the shadow of the Earth. So NASA said, okay, take some temperature readings, and let's just see how they vary. You'd think they'd have worked out by then, by the time the shuttle was flying in the 1980s, what the temperature of space was, but no, they had to do it all over again. So they took temperature readings up there, and the report said that within a few minutes of entering the sun, having come out of the shadow of the Earth, entering the sun, the temperature increased by over 100 degrees centigrade within a few minutes. So they were able to prove that they needed electric heaters in their gloves, which is what they got. The point about that is that if you're standing in sunlight on the lunar surface, you're in the direct energy of the sun all the time, because there's no shade on the moon. You will be in extremely high temperature. So how do they keep cool? Because humans cannot work in much over about 20, 25 degrees centigrade.
Oh, you've never lived in northern Canada then, my friend.
Well, could you work in... Oh, all right, no, that's a silly question. Could you work in minus 40 degrees? Yes, you can, because people do work in that temperature. But they are prepared for it. But you wouldn't... let's just say that if you had to wear a spacesuit in northern Canada, where the temperature falls, what is minus 40 centigrade fair, minus 50 centigrade, something like that.
I'll go outside.
It's cold.
I'll go outside and snow blow my driveway at minus 25.
Right. Okay. But what I was referring to here was the heat, not the cold. Now, we can come on to the cold in a minute. But the heat on the moon will be plus 100, 120 degrees centigrade. That is severely above what you would be comfortable working in. Humans can't work in much over about 25 degrees centigrade, 70, 75 degrees Fahrenheit. So how did they keep cool? Because the longest EVA, extravehicular activity, moonwalk, was just under 8 hours straight. No stops. I was on Apollo 17. They were outside in direct sunlight for 8 hours. And this sunlight it's the radiant energy of the sun. It's like standing in front of a fire. You know, if you've got logs burning in a fire, you can feel the heat coming off them. That's the radiant energy of the logs. And you can't stand in front of that for very long. If it's a big fire. On the moon, there's a big fire in the sky. It's called the sun. And that is producing this radiant energy. Astronauts would have to remove some of that energy. It would have to be removed from inside their spacesuit, because they're also generating heat themselves by moving around, by doing work. I mean, it's a standard procedure. So how did they remove this energy? Because a vacuum, which is what we got on the moon, is the best insulator of them all. Where was the heat? You can't, like air conditioning dumps heat from inside a room to outside a room. You can't do that on the moon because you can't dump the heat anywhere. The only way you can get rid of the heat is by radiating it away, or the explosive decompression of water. So you can carry water with you and you expel that, and it will remove heat, but you can't carry enough water. You can calculate how much water is required to remove a certain amount of heat in a certain period of time. And the amount of water that the astronauts carried was about 3 liters. They would need about 30 liters to remove the amount of heat that we're told will be generated by the sun. So something doesn't add up here. And this would apply. So you've got all these anomalies in the record. It's a great story. As I say, I've seen 80-foot gorillas climb the Empire State Building in King Kong. In fact, the more recent film is a much better version of it than the 1930s film, which the special effects were a bit primitive back then. But the point is that we suspended our disbelief and we were prepared to believe that, yes, that's an 80-foot gorilla climbing the Empire State Building, swatting at aircraft. Or it's a very persuasive dinosaur chasing kids around this kitchen in Jurassic Park. Yes, it's Hollywood at its finest. We'll suspend our disbelief, but we're nowhere watching a film. It's a story. And I claim that Apollo is the same. It's a story to persuade us that humans have walked on the moon. Now, that was 50 years ago, Apollo. 12 astronauts allegedly walked on the lunar surface, and they haven't been back. Oh, there wasn't enough money. Oh, there's no interest in doing it. They're just getting around to doing it now, aren't they? That's President Trump has decreed that humans must be returned to the moon by 2024. Well, that was 5 years. That's 5 years he gave them to do it. You think it would be simple enough? Dig out the old plans of how we did it back then and just do it in 21st century technology. Simple, no problem. What's the hold-up? There's huge hold-ups. They haven't got a rocket yet that's been tested. They haven't got a spacecraft with a re-entry testing being done. They haven't got the spacesuits being made. You have to make some for the women. It's called the Artemis program, the new return to the moon. Artemis was Apollo's twin sister, so it's reasonable to assume that women are going to be involved somewhere. But none of that has happened yet. What's going on? It's not simple. Space travel is extremely difficult. And back in the 60s, space travel was cutting edge. It was the high tech of its day. And though it may seem very easy from our viewpoint of the 21st century, from 2020, looking back 50 years, we say, well, they did it successfully back then. You know, they had pretty primitive technology, but they appear to have done it. No, they didn't. It was a brilliantly executed propaganda exercise. So why didn't the Russians blow the whistle? Why didn't the Russians come out and say, oh, didn't happen? Couldn't have happened. Okay, that's a reasonable point to make. Who in Russia would have blown the whistle back in the 1960s, 1970s? The head of the Soviet Politburo was Leonid Brezhnev at the time. Who would have had the access to him and have the technical knowledge to know that what we were being shown by the US Apollo program was a fake? Who would have had the knowledge to do it? Why did nobody in the West blow the whistle? Why did no photographers? Why did no engineers? Why did no biologists? Why did no anthropologists? Why did no ologists? Why did none of them come forward and say, it's fake? They did come forward and say it's fake, but nobody wanted to believe them. Nobody wanted to listen to it. Nobody wanted to hear that the emperor has no clothes. They didn't want to believe it, so they didn't. So they went along with the fantasy of landing a man on the moon. But now it's being exposed, because if you can't do it with 21st century technology, it certainly didn't happen with 1960s technology. And we've got a real problem here, because how is NASA going to explain this one away? I'd love to hear it. I'd love to see it, because if I'm wrong, I want to know. But there's a saying that Carl Sagan, who was a brilliant science populist, said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Landing a man on the moon is an extraordinary claim. Where is the extraordinary evidence in support of it? I don't know. I haven't seen it.
Hold on right there, because we are going to come back here from the break at the bottom of the hour, continuing our discussion. Was the Apollo moon landings real, fake? Were they filmed on the moon or on Earth? Marcus Allen continues the debate and the discussion right after this on Spaced Out Radio. It's a good show so far, man. Solid.
Oh, thank you. Oh, it's good. It's in fact, so the direction you point me is a very interesting one. It's almost as if you know what my answers are going to be.
Well, I'm hitting you up with the whole NASA thing next. So, and I heard you were coughing there a little bit. So, good time to get you some water or some tea or something.
Yeah,
hot tea if you got it.
I should get a cup of tea if that's okay with you.
You go right ahead. I'm just hanging out here, man. I am just hanging out.
Well, you can keep talking, because I don't have to go far to do my tea.
That's awesome. Listen to that teapot boil, people. Listen to that teapot boil right there. That's an official United Kingdom teapot right there, everybody. We have only wished to hear those in North America work.
So say it again?
Oh, we're just giving the play-by-play of your teapot there.
All right, okay. Yeah.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is so interesting.
I'm glad you like it. It's a fascinating subject. I mean, I've been studying it in 25 years. Yeah.
You know what?
About 200.
Are you free next month?
Hang on, where are we?
Or not
now?
next month, but I'm sorry, in August.
Yeah.
I would love to. I would love to do this show, continue this show on the NASA moon landings, but I would love to bring you back on in August or September to discuss crop circles.
Oh, now there's a subject.
Would you be? Yeah. Would you mind doing that with us?
No, I can do. Yeah.
All right. I think Corey and our booking guy is listening, so I'll get Corey to get a hold of you, so that way we can book you for August or September. What would you prefer, August or September?
Let me think. Hang on, August, September. The crop circles, if they finish, I mean, there have been some already this year. Not so many as one would expect, but there have been some. Probably September would be best, because then the whole season will be finished and look back on it. Yeah.
Okay. There's actually a season for those?
Yes, it goes from about June through to August. Because by the end of August, the crops have been harvested.
That's right.
And they're all just.
That's right.
It's a fairly short season. Having said that, there's a good friend of mine who is probably, I would say, one of the most prominent crop circle researchers. He's written several books about it and knows a great deal about it. A guy called Andy Thomas. His website is truthagenda.org.
All right. The whole entire chat room, there's 111 people in there, and they want to know, what kind of tea are you drinking right now?
Oh, that's Twinings, Earl Grey.
We knew it was Earl Grey. Earl Grey gets the vote tonight. Earl Grey. We knew it. It's the only tea to drink.
Yeah, Twinings, Earl Grey.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
It's a good tea.
Mm-hmm. When I'm sick, that's what I drink. Twinings Earl Grey.
Yeah, it's good. It's got that night. What's the name of the oil they put in it? It starts with a B. I forget what it's called. But it's just that little bit more fragrant than your average, what we call builder's tea.
Yes.
You know, the regular tea.
Yes.
It's fine. It's a matter of, PG Tips and Yorkshire tea, things like that. But Twinings is the one to buy.
All right. All right. Bomber wants to know, what do they call grandpas in the UK?
What do they call what?
Grandfathers.
Granddads. Well, that's what my grandson calls me, Granddad.
Excellent. All right, my friend, we're about to get going here as we kick off the second half of the show. Everybody, we want to remind you that the Super Chat is open. Good way to support what we do. Hit that subscribe button. Ring that bell. Thumbs up. Go to our website, spacedoutradio.com. Grab a shirt from the vault. And, of course, join the Space Travelers Club. Here we go with the show. We passed the halfway point of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. Thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate you taking the time. Reminder to all of you that if you miss portions of this show or others, you know what I want you to do? I want you to check out our free archives at youtube.com/spaced out radio. The only thing I ask for in return is hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio for the show, and my personal handle at Dave Scott SOR. We solved a mystery during the break here. Number of our listeners in the YouTube chat room were wondering what kind of tea that our guest tonight, Marcus Allen, was brewing in the background. Earl Grey. If you had Earl Grey on your scorecard, you are a winner tonight for guessing what kind of tea is Marcus Allen drinking. We're talking the Apollo program tonight. Did we land on the moon? Did we not, Mr. Allen? Thank you for joining us tonight.
It's good to be here, Dave. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, yes. And we should let the audience know we're going to have you back on in September. And we're going to be talking about another one of your loves for research in crop circles. And we're going to be talking to you about that over in September as well.
That's good. Yeah. Plenty to talk about crop circles.
I'm excited about it. I'm excited about it. All right. I got to ask you this. What would the purpose of NASA have for covering up the entire story of Apollo?
Good point. Why would they cover it up? You have to take yourself back to the late 1960s. What was happening in America? What was happening in the world? The Vietnam War was starting. Well, it started in 1964 by one of those famous false flag events, the Gulf of Tonkin incident. And for 10 years after 1964, until America rather ignominiously pulled themselves out of Vietnam, 58,000 American civilians soldiers were killed, 3 million Vietnamese were killed. That is the price you pay for crass incompetence. So the Vietnam War was getting very unpleasant. The Cold War was ramping up, the Cold War between America and the Soviet Union. Who had the best political system? Who had the biggest bomb? Who could destroy the most people? Who could influence the most nations? That was all going on. The Cold War. It was a very unpleasant political time. There were also riots going on inside America. The Democrat convention in Chicago, where protesters were actually being shot dead by the National Guard. That's how unpleasant it was becoming. So America had to be seen to be succeeding, and Apollo was the success story. Apollo had to be the success story because everything else was failure and disaster and downhill. So Apollo had to be seen to be successful. Whether it happened or not was basically irrelevant. It had to be seen to be successful. And the best way to do that is using what America is quite good at, which is creating visual images to support their political proposals. They have access to Hollywood. They have access to a great deal of technical knowledge within the film business, with the film industry. And I'm not saying that Hollywood was directly involved. And before anybody here starts saying, oh, it's all Kubrick. No, it wasn't Kubrick. He was such a perfectionist. He always wanted to shoot on location if he could. But he couldn't in this case. And Kubrick wasn't involved. He was busy doing his masterpiece, 2001: A Space Odyssey, which was released in 1968. There were other films coming out as well. There were a lot of people who were very good at special effects on film. Now, just north of Los Angeles, in a place called Laurel Canyon, which is a road, it's where a lot of musicians lived in the early 1960s, who incidentally had a lot of connections with the intelligence services. One of the most famous was Jim Morrison, whose father was Admiral George Morrison, who actually was the American naval commander at the Gulf of Tonkin. So there are interesting connections there. But in Laurel Canyon, there was a U.S. Air Force facility called Lookout Mountain Laboratory, which was a very well equipped, it was said to be even better equipped than any Hollywood studio, very well equipped film production facility, basically post-production. It's now, Lookout Mountain Laboratories is now a private home. It's owned by Jared Leto, the singer and actor. But up to the late 1960s, it operated as a U.S. Air Force film production facility. There's also, near San Francisco, a place called Menlo Park. And at Menlo Park is one of the largest buildings in North America. It's called Hangar 1. It was built in the 1930s as an airship hangar. It's several hundred foot long. It's vast. You can see it on Google Maps now. Just put Hangar 1 Menlo Park and you'll see it. And this is where I suggest that a lot of the filming of the big sets was done because everything could be controlled. It's where Tom Hanks filmed Apollo 13 and the miniseries From the Earth to the Moon. It was all done at Menlo Park because it's a huge and controllable environment. Now, whether that is what happened or not, I don't know, but it makes much more sense than saying they went to the moon to film it for various reasons, such as the film wouldn't work. The rockets couldn't get there. The astronauts wouldn't survive. It's much easier to film it here on Earth under controlled studio conditions. There were plenty of other places around. Another one is Cinder Lake near Flagstaff in Arizona, where a life-size version of the Sea of Tranquility on which the Apollo 11 landing would take place was constructed by the U.S. Geological Survey. It's called Cinder Lake because basically that's what it consists of. It's volcanic cinder, which is similar to the lunar surface. The U.S. Geological Survey took a few sticks of dynamite and created some craters, identical to the craters around which they will be landing on Apollo 11. There is also near to that location a landfill site which had a huge amount of military equipment just dumped, which would make nice rocks if you could spray them with a bit of shotcrete. And that's what appears to have happened. So a lot of what we see as images taken on the moon were taken in Arizona at Cinder Lake. Some was filmed in Hawaii, some in Iceland. These are all similar physical locations to what we'd expect to find on the moon. So what you've got is a plausible explanation for how it was done, but people don't want to believe it. People say, no, it couldn't possibly have happened. Oh, there's 400,000 people who worked for it. Oh, they would have blown the whistle. Oh, no, you can't keep a secret. Of course you can keep a secret. The Manhattan Project employed 150,000 people, and the first anybody knew of what they were doing was when the bomb went off over Hiroshima. 1 million people were assembled for the D-Day landings in 1944. The Germans didn't find out what was going on until the landing craft discharged its troops onto the beaches of Normandy. Secrets can be kept. And the reason that secrets can be kept is very simple. It's national security. If you tell people this is in the interests of national security, most people, being patriotic, will say, okay, I agree with that. I won't be discussing it beyond the people I'm allowed to talk to about it. And they will go along with that. All the astronauts were military. A lot of the senior personnel at NASA were military. The US Air Force was brought in to get the whole operation back on track after the disaster of Apollo 1, when some idiot decided to pressurize the cabin containing pure oxygen at 20 pounds per square inch. Guess what's going to happen? It'll explode if there's an electrical fault. which is what appears to have happened. So the US Air Force was brought in. They introduced a lot of their systems, which had worked very well. And people were willing to go along with it because landing a man on the moon, defeating the Soviet Union, was a matter of national importance and national security. They would go along with it. They're not going to question it. They're not going to blow the whistle. There's no whistle to blow. They just do it as best they can. And that's what they were doing, the very best job they could. They knew what they had to achieve, and by and large, they achieved it. But could the rocket do what it was supposed to have done? Were the engines on the Saturn V rocket, I said there were 5 engines, they produced 1.5 million pounds of thrust each. That's about 600 tons. It's a vast amount of energy. Were the engines up to the job? Could they launch the purported 46 tons into lunar orbit, 130 tons into Earth orbit? That's what we're told the Saturn V rocket did. Since that, no rocket has come anywhere close to achieving that level of power, let alone that amount launched into Earth orbit. The space shuttle couldn't do it. The Space Launch System, the new super-duper wonderful new rocket, can't do it. The BFR, the big Falcon rocket from SpaceX, can just about do it, we're told, but it hasn't been tested yet. So all this is going on. So there's a lot of publicity about it. There's a lot of, oh, we are wonderful, we're doing all this stuff now. Oh, let's see it. Let's see it happen. And whether Apollo did what we're told it did, I think is very much open to doubt, because nobody has been able to prove it. Nobody has been able to come forward with a convincing explanation. Even the Soviet Union were trying to get to the moon.
Right. And that leads to Joe's question in our chat room here. Why didn't the Russians call BS on the moon landing if it didn't happen?
I've covered part of that earlier, like who in the Soviet Union would have done it. The Soviet political system was very different from those in the West. Who would have had the knowledge to say that this was fake, and also the political access to the Politburo? And even if they had said, oh, we just don't believe what we just seen, America would just turn around and say, oh, it's sour grapes because we beat you to it. And that would probably shut them up. But there's also another point which is not generally known about. In September 1968, i.e. before Apollo 8 allegedly launched, September 1968, the first contracts were signed between the Soviet Union, as it was then, and the governments of Germany, Hungary, and Austria to supply them with the one major product the Soviet Union had available for export, natural gas. The whole deal is called pipes for gas. West Germany would build the pipes, 2,000 kilometers of 4-foot diameter pipe, and the Soviet Union would supply the gas. This would ensure the survival of the Soviet Union because it had no other means of earning foreign currency. They weren't going to blow the whistle on some Americans prancing around allegedly on the lunar surface if it would jeopardize their national income. Now that is generally not known about, but it's perfectly easy to check out the details of it. So pipes for gas is one of the names given to it, and there are many pipelines from the Soviet Union. The natural gas in the Soviet Union comes from Siberia. There are vast reserves of natural gas and quite a lot of reserves of oil. And there is now a big row going on about what's called Nord Stream 2, which is one of the main pipelines coming out of St. Petersburg under the Baltic, and it enters Germany, not West Germany anymore, but Germany, on the north coast of Germany. That's where one of the major supply routes come in, because they've had all this problem with Ukraine. That used to be the main transit point, and Ukraine would charge the Soviet Union transit fees for putting the natural gas across their territory. So the Soviet Union, or the Russian Federation have had to reroute some of their supply. So the supply of natural gas took a much greater precedence than pointing out that America weren't landing on the moon, because the Soviet Union knew perfectly well they weren't, because they'd already said so. In the mid-1960s, the Soviet Union used as a tracking station Jodrell Bank here in the UK. It's near Manchester in central UK. They used the radio telescope at Jodrell Bank to assist in the tracking of Soviet spacecraft, especially the Soviet spacecraft going to the moon. This was done it was quite open about it. It was done with the knowledge of the British government and the American government. And the head of the Jodrell Bank radio telescope at the time was Sir Bernard Lovell, who was quite a well-known astronomer. And he was invited to visit the Soviet Union on several occasions in the 1960s. And he was quite open about it. He said, look, when are you guys going to send somebody to the moon? When are you going to send a cosmonaut to the moon? And I said, well, we intend to. We've got a rocket to do it, called the N1 rocket. We've got a spacecraft in which they'll travel, but we will not be sending a cosmonaut to the moon until we can ensure their safe return due to the dangers of radiation. So they knew about the problem. It wasn't as if it was a big secret. Now, there's an interesting follow-up on that. Also in September 1968, the Soviet Union launched lunar Zond 5. It's an unmanned Soviet craft. It was launched to the moon. It would orbit the moon and return to Earth. This would be the very first time any capsule launched from Earth would return intact to Earth. It landed in the Indian Ocean. And on board were 2 turtles, small tortoises, some plants, some seeds, various other biological life, to test what would happen in the radiation. And they landed, and the turtles were okay, probably a bit pissed off, but they're happy to be back on Earth now. And they were still alive, so obviously there was no problem with radiation, was there? Well, it wasn't a very good test, because like cockroaches will be the one animal that will survive a nuclear blast, turtles can survive thousands of times higher levels of radiation exposure than humans can. So it wasn't a particularly good test. Because if you go to your dentist to have your tooth x-ray, you'll probably have to wear a lead apron, or certainly the operator of the equipment will be wearing a protection against the radiation. Because radiation is cumulative in the human body. It'll kill you if you get too much of it. So you've got this problem with radiation. The Soviet Union knew perfectly well there was a problem with it. And they actually announced it. They didn't put 2 and 2 together. They just said, well, radiation's a problem, and we won't be going to the moon until we can solve it. Some of the senior personnel at NASA have said exactly the same thing. When we get out beyond the Van Allen belts, we want to be sure that our astronauts are not exposed to a greater level of radiation than they can survive. Well, if radiation is just no worse than a couple of chest x-rays, what's the problem? It's a major problem. It's lethal to humans, and we haven't solved it yet. And we're nowhere near solving it.
All right, let's move on to another question here from our audience. This one comes from Gary in our Spreaker chat room, and he is asking, where is the evidence that it was filmed here on Earth? I want to see if there is no evidence that this moon landing was fake, then they went to the moon. And we've got about 3.5 minutes here.
Okay. Where's the evidence it was filmed on the moon?
On Earth.
I've already covered. All right. Evidence it was filmed on Earth. What I'm saying is, where is the evidence it was filmed on the moon? Because if it was filmed on the moon, which you're claiming, how did the film survive the problems of the vacuum of space, the hard vacuum, which we know exists on the moon, and the radiation, not just in the Van Allen belts, but in space as well? Solar particle events, galactic cosmic rays. Where is the evidence that the film we've seen survived all that and could survive the vacuum of space? And we know that the vacuum of space does destroy photographic film. So the evidence that it was filmed here on Earth is overwhelming, because it could not have been filmed on the lunar surface for those two good reasons, let alone getting there in the first place to film it. We all want to believe that I want to believe that man has landed on the moon. But I'm not prepared to go along with the propaganda that we've been fed for the last 50-odd years and say, well, that's good enough. No, they're having trouble getting back to the moon now in the 21st century. That rather reinforces what I'm saying, that it never happened in the first place. And the evidence for it being filmed here on Earth is it could not have been filmed on the moon for the reasons we've outlined: vacuum and radiation. I hope that answers the question.
All right. Let me get to another question here, a follow-up from Gary here, and this would be, he says, I watched this on TV. My mother said this was history. Why is our history going to, well, pretty much into the garbage?
Well, that's where quite a lot of history goes into the garbage eventually when the full story comes out. Why did America invade Vietnam? Was it to protect something? Was it to ensure that the military-industrial complex was alive and well and earning a lot of money? No. 58,000 Americans died in Vietnam. That's a high price to pay for that sort of propaganda.
No, I understand that, and I can appreciate that, and I know we have a number of Vietnam veterans who are listening to this show, and we thank them, each and every one of them, for their service and everything that goes along with that, because I mean that was an ugly situation back then. But getting back to the whole NASA bit, I think that's where the biggest confusion lies. Is we got about a minute to go here. Is that the majority of us cannot figure out why there would be 50 years plus of deception over this cause.
That's a good point. Why should there be that amount? Because once the deception was perpetrated originally, it had to be kept alive. And we've seen it at the 50th anniversary, where you've got all these films of Apollo 11 and First Man and all the other things. There are books about it coming out all the time. There are a lot of people who've put a lot of energy and effort, and their integrity is at stake. They're not about to give up easily. They're not just going to throw their hands up and say, "Oh, sorry guys, we've misled you for the last 50 years." It's not going to happen. Though I would say one thing, President Trump is very well informed. He's very well informed about a lot of things which he doesn't talk very much about. He's had to be. That's his business.
Right.
Now, if he is fully aware that there are question marks, let's just say question marks over
save that thought, because we got to go to break. All right, we're going to go to break right now. We have Marcus Allen for another 30 minutes on Spaced Out Radio. Then we're going to hook up across Canada with Drex, the SOR Newswire, and the Thought of the Dave. A jam-packed Hour 3 coming up on Spaced Out Radio right after this. Okay, my friend, I'm just going to run my dogs back outside for the final time. I'll be right back, okay?
Okay, Dave. Yeah, that's fine.
Hello, this is your guitar man, Ron Bumblefoot Thal, and I have to tell you, I love the response I get for Little Brother is Watching from Spaced Out Radio fans. It's amazing how music can inspire and make people think deeper about what's going on in the supernatural world. You can head over to my website, bumblefoot.com, to check out my music, my guitar workshops, my touring, even check out some of the hot sauces that I'm working on. And make sure you keep on listening, because with Spaced Out Radio, you know Little Brother is watching.
Hi there, this is the paranormal lawyer Michael W. Hall. I'd like to invite you to listen in each Sunday night where we're going to open up your eyes to everything strange and paranormal. I will be hosting some great guests with topics that affect us all, such as UFOs, ghosts, and everything paranormal. Let's learn together on Spaced Out Radio Sunday with myself, Michael W. Hall, the paranormal lawyer at spacedoutradio.com.
We all know on Spaced Out Radio we love a good beard and mustache, so why not take care of your facial hair with Mighty Moose Beard Oil? Made in Canada, we're taking care of beards and stashes around the world. We use 100% natural ingredients with our oils and balms to make your whiskers feel silky smooth. Use promo code SOR2019 at mightymoosebeard.com today.
The party is always on at the Moose Vancouver. The Moose Vancouver is where you want to be when visiting Canada's West Coast. Open until 2 a.m. nightly, the Moose cranks up the rock while serving some of the best rated food in the city. The menu starts at $6.95. Why party anywhere else in Vancouver when the Moose is right there? Get your horns up and rock with the Moose, the official party bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Looking for creative ways to get your company out in the public? How about advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Our sales department is waiting to hear from you, and we can work around any budget. From commercial spots to banners to special promotions, there are many opportunities to get your name and product out to our SOR listeners. For a price guide and more information, please contact us at sales@spacedoutradio.com.
I'm feeling a little spicy tonight. What to do? What to do?
Why not get bumblefuck?
4 million Scoville units of pure hard rock. Bumblefoot hot sauces come in 3 flavors. The burning bumble. Tone it down a bit with Bumblicious and throw the sauce on everything.
Spice it up. Bumble me, baby. Bumblefoot hot sauce. Get it today at kajans.com.
The SOR Vault is open for business, and do we have some cool swag for you to pick up? All you have to do is head over to our website and click on the SOR Vault. You have a variety of cool logos to choose from, and put them on anything you want. T-shirts, hoodies, hats, coffee mugs, you name it, we can get it to you. So do your shopping by supporting the store you love. Get your Spaced Out Radio swag at the SOR Vault today.
We are scouring the world for the most intriguing stories of your day. Take the time to read up on the SOR Newswire, where our team, led by Captain Shirk, will deliver to you some of the best paranormal and supernatural news, along with some stories that will blow your mind from the weird to the wacky. It's the news outside the news that piques interest, and that's what we're looking to deliver to you. The SOR Newswire, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Folks had a good walk.
Hello, everyone. This is Ryan Stacy from the Experiencer Support Association, otherwise known as TESSA. We're glad to team up with Spaced Out Radio to help investigate your experiences on the SOR Sightline report.
Taking care of about 5
Together,
things at once.
we'll investigate the strange sightings and occurrences
now
you've
I
had.
can hear you. Go ahead. Sorry?
Yeah, I was just saying you've got this down to a fine art now, haven't you? You can do the interview, have a nice chat, and then take the dogs out for a walk.
Oh, yeah.
There's probably a big control panel you've got in front of you there to make sure everything works properly.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if it's going out on YouTube as well, that's quite impressive.
Well, we try and do our best here. You know, we try and do our best. You know.
Well, I think you do pretty well.
Thank you.
You got some good viewing figures as well.
Yeah, we do all right. We do all right. We're always looking to get bigger. And, you know, we're trying.
It's a matter of having good subjects and that interest people and they want to listen to what's being said.
By the way, the sun just went down here.
Did it? Oh, it's nice and bright here.
Well, say hello, because it's just fading away in the north, and then the sun will start to rise here about, starts getting bright about 3:15 in the morning.
That's pretty good. That's pretty. I was just trying to work out if you're further north than London.
I don't know.
Vancouver. I'm not sure.
I don't know.
It's certainly different.
What parallel are you on?
51 north.
Okay, so I think I'm about 50. Well, Vancouver is just above 49.
Okay.
So I'm about, I think I'm 53 or 55. I'll find out during the break or when we come up here. We are just about to get going here, so bear with me.
.com/Spaced Out Radio. And while you're there, don't forget to check out our free archives and leave a comment. See you there.
Here we go with the music.
You like to
make sure you give us a thumbs up, YouTube.
SpacedOutRadio.com.
Hit that bell thing. Hit the subscribe button. We'd appreciate that.
Back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Let's kick off a jam-packed third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Thank you so much for being with us. We welcome back everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates across North America and on the digital side on Revolution Radio and TalkStream Live. Remember, you can check out all of our archives for free by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Dyschromatopic. Dyschromatopic is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and my personal handle at Dave Scott SOR. We're talking about the NASA Apollo missions to the moon. Did they happen? Did they not? Researcher from Nexus Magazine, we have Marcus Allen here, who believes there's a lot more to the story than what we've been told. Mr. Allen, welcome back.
Thank you, Dave.
Now, during the break, we were talking about longitude and latitude regarding if London was higher than Vancouver. And yes, it is. So London and where I live would be on the same parallel. Thank you to the Desert Clam who quickly Googled that for me. I'm on 51.75 latitude.
That's very close to what London is on.
Yes.
In terms of latitude. But of course, we don't have the extremes of weather that you have to suffer from.
Yeah, I don't know why, but we get it good here. And right now it's mosquito season. Right through July, it'll be mosquito season, and then we're free and clear. All right, my friend, let's continue on with the NASA moon landings. And you believe that they are a hoax, and you've stirred and ruffled the feathers with a lot of people listening tonight because history has told us differently. And, one of the things that has always kind of, rubbed me the wrong way about those who say that this is fake is the word proof. Show us proof, photographs, video evidence. There's hasn't been anybody who's ever come out saying that I worked on this project to fake these photos or to fake this video. Why do you think that has been so tightly kept?
Partly because there were very, very few people involved in the actual fakery. People who, right. If we go back to the whole Apollo program from 1961 through to 1972, there was a lot of simulations being done. I mean, that's a normal thing to do. You're going to go to a place you've never been to before. You want to simulate it as closely as you can. Same way that airline pilots are trained on simulators. If you get into one of these simulators, and let's say you're going to land at, Heathrow Airport in my case, you're in one of these simulators. It looks very, very much as if it is Heathrow Airport. You're coming into land, the buildings around you, the sites ahead of you, they'll be exactly what you'd expect to see. This is what simulation is about. Apollo had simulators, similar to those airline simulators we see today. They had simulators for the command module. They had simulators for the lunar landers. And in order to do that, they had to produce film showing what would be outside the window as the astronauts would be trying to land their lunar landers. So it was filmed, and there are pictures of the surface that was filmed for these simulators. They're big sections, different sections, and these were taken from the lunar orbiter photographs. I'm not talking about the lunar reconnaissance orbiter, that comes much later. The lunar orbiter photographs provided the original material for the simulation to be created. That's what it was about. Nothing secret about any of that. None of the people who were doing it would have thought anything odd about creating a simulated environment to be filmed so that the astronauts could see what they would be looking at as they were landing or attempting to land their craft. That's what it was about. Whether they did land the craft or whether what we saw were film of the simulators, because there were certainly lunar landing simulators, which were quite well known, and there are photographs of them. There's nothing secret about any of them. So all of these would have been filmed. If you're going to do a simulation of, let's say, Apollo 11, that was 8 days from takeoff to landing. So the simulation would have been 8 days. So the crew at Houston, who were the mission control at Houston, would have been on duty, various teams. They had, I think, 3 different teams. Obviously, you can't stay on duty all the time, so you have teams coming in. They had to go through the whole simulated exercise. So they had a satellite launched. It was called the Tetra A satellite, testing and training satellite, which was launched in order that they could be receiving signals as if from space, so that when they were looking at their consoles and they were checking through what was supposed to be happening, they would have what looked to them a real signal. They couldn't tell where the signal was coming from. All they're seeing is what's on their screen. But somebody had to create the signal to be sent to the satellite to be received back on at Houston so they could simulate the whole mission. It was done for all of the 6 or 7 missions in total. Apollo 13 we've already discussed. So a simulation took place, and it was filmed, and it was recorded, and astronauts will then be debriefed on it. This is quite normal. Nothing secret about any of it. There were people who would have been involved in creating it as the final definitive film of the landing, yes, but not many, probably about 40 or 50 at the most. The astronauts would certainly have been involved, because if they weren't actually on the moon, they had to persuade the public that they had been on the moon. And if anybody has ever seen the Apollo 11 press conference, where the 3 astronauts, Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins, sat in front of the world's press for an hour and a half answering questions, and the questions were very enthusiastic questions, they don't look particularly happy. In fact, they look embarrassed. They look almost as if they would rather be anywhere but there. These are men who are supposed to have created an epoch-defining event, first man to land on the moon. They look embarrassed. They look unhappy. Right, they were certainly trained astronauts. They might have been trained public speakers, but tough. That doesn't add up. They knew what they were going to let themselves in for. They knew what they were going to be doing. If they felt embarrassed about being questioned by the press, they should have simulated a press conference to get used to the idea. It's not rocket science. Why are they so embarrassed? They were prepared to take the benefits of having done it and go around the world and be feted and welcomed everywhere they went as being the first men on the moon. they don't look as if they were, and they don't talk as if they were either.
Okay.
So again,
well, how are they supposed to talk?
Well, in the same way that anybody who succeeds at something that they have trained years for, like an athlete or a soccer player or a football player or a hockey player, would talk when they have won a gold medal enthusiastically.
Okay, now you entered my wheelhouse here for a second, because being a former sports reporter, okay, there is a huge difference between athletes and the way they celebrated in the 60s and 70s comparatively to the way they celebrated in the 90s, 2000s, and into this century and decade as well. I mean, there is a huge difference. Back then, everything was very much stoic and very humbling. I mean, you didn't see the big parties. You didn't see the big jumping around and screaming and hooting and hollering. You saw people just proud that, taking a deep breath, maybe just relaxing, that they accomplished something massive.
Okay, so yeah, good point. Because we are talking 50, 60 years ago, when emotions were not considered to be things to display particularly well. So yeah, I mean that's a good point, but it still does seem a bit, shall we say, odd, if that's the right word, that they weren't more enthusiastic about what they had achieved, because everybody around them was so enthusiastic about it. You'd think it would have reflected a little bit on how they behaved.
Okay,
maybe I'm.
Okay, when Lou Gehrig had to retire from baseball, or when Babe Ruth retired from baseball, the crowds were going wild. All right, even with ticker tape parades with the Yankees and everything like that, yet they stood there humbly, almost bashful. And this is probably the first part of your argument that I can say that I don't agree with.
Okay, well, I'm glad it's the first part. I thought after a couple of hours we had a few more, but no, it's an excellent point you make, because that press conference is quoted quite often as being strange. But if you're putting 21st century emotions onto it and you're not seeing them, it could be just what you said, that is not the way people behaved back in those days, in the 1960s.
Exactly. That's my point there.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get to a question here from Corey. All right. Or pardon me, Human Carl. We got to make the distinction between Human Carl and Alien Carl around here, because we don't want to confuse the two.
Sounds a good name.
All right. Human Carl is asking, what did the Apollo craft do while it was supposed to be landing on the moon? Did it and the crew just orbit the Earth until it was time to come home?
Good point. Yes, that's what they did. Those rockets certainly took off. They had to go somewhere. I mean, one can construct all manner of complicated stories about coming down into the Atlantic, but I don't think that's really technically possible without being spotted, because don't forget the Soviet Navy were doing exercises there. Anyway, no, I think they went into low Earth orbit, stayed in low Earth orbit for as long as it was necessary for the length of time the mission was supposed to last, and then come back, re-enter. And don't forget, coming back from low Earth orbit is much easier than coming back from lunar orbit in terms of speed and danger involved. They would come back from lunar orbit because nobody was looking out for them, because nobody expected them to be in low Earth orbit. And they're not that easy to see. I mean, satellites are not that easy to see. And anyway, they would just be the command module. It wouldn't be any more than that, because the huge rocket, the first section was jettisoned at about 40 miles downrange. The second section was jettisoned in low Earth orbit, about 100 miles up. So it wouldn't be difficult to do it. And who would be looking out for them? Because they weren't expected to be in low Earth orbit. And unless you know where to look, I mean, even now, you can see that the International Space Station is a huge thing. You can see that when it's at a particular point where it's in the evening, where the sun is low in the horizon, and it strikes the underside of the International Space Station. If you're in the right place, you know where to look and you know what time to look, you can see it. It's a sort of moving light across the horizon. So if they went into low Earth orbit, did a bit of discussion between Houston and who were also expecting them to be on their way to the moon, so they knew what the script was supposed to be. And if you look at any of the Apollo press packs, which are several hundred pages long, they detail everything that happens to the nearest second, from launch to splashdown, is detailed in advance to the nearest second. So they knew what they had to say. They knew what they were supposed to be doing. And my contention would be that Apollo 13 was scripted in advance, because it encouraged because after the disaster of Apollo 12, where there was no television picture, so there was nothing for anybody to watch, they had to get the interest up again. So that's what happened in Apollo 13. And then you get on to Apollo 15, where they could take the little buggy onto the moon. And if you look at some of the film of that, there's some very strange effects created by this buggy. Right, so yeah, answer to the question, they went into low Earth orbit, stayed there for as long as they had to for the mission, came back down again, as we saw.
Interesting.
Or, even worse, and there are photographs actually showing an Apollo command module being shoved out the back of a Galaxy 130. So it could be they weren't even on the rocket in the first place, because if that rocket had exploded on the launch pad, they would have to have been killed. Now, if they weren't on the rocket and the rocket exploded, we've got the scenario depicted rather graphically in the film Capricorn 1. And I do wonder if film Capricorn 1 was based on certain information which was known to certain individuals around the film business, and they made a film about it. It's happened so often in the past that Hollywood has put forward stories that are of benefit to the intelligence services. The two industries, intelligence services and Hollywood, work closely together.
Well, I mean, we see that with the alien technology too. I mean, when's the last time Hollywood promoted extraterrestrials in a positive mode?
Exactly. Are we supposed to look on any extraterrestrial as an enemy? Because that seems to be how they are portrayed. But there's no evidence that they're anything other than friendly. We don't know. So if they can get here, and they could take over Earth whenever they wanted to, if their technology is so advanced, they could do it. But they don't. It's obviously they've taken notice of the old Star Trek Prime Directive: do not interfere.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so there's
it's interesting.
Some unanswered questions around that, and it's now coming out that the amount of cooperation between the U.S. government, Hollywood, and the intelligence services. You've heard of Operation Mockingbird?
Yes.
Right. That's how it was done. And it's still being done today. It never stopped, which is why we see such appallingly distorted news. It's being written not by the reporters who are investigating it, but by people who are trying to foment an agenda.
We've only got 4.5 minutes left with you tonight, and I know there's a few more questions here. Gary is asking, how do rockets work then in a vacuum?
The vacuum isn't relevant to the operation of a rocket. A rocket produces a thrust against itself. That's how they work. And being in a vacuum is irrelevant, in my view. Jet engines can't work in a vacuum. propeller-driven aircraft can't work in a vacuum, but rockets can, because it provides its own thrust. How's that as an answer?
All right. I guess that one works. So is NASA still hoaxing events of today's plans to get back to the moon?
No, I think that NASA have got a major problem on their hands now. They have to do it for real because enough people are watching and checking out what they're doing in considerable detail because of the access to the internet and YouTube and all the people who are space enthusiasts. I mean, I consider myself a space enthusiast, but we want NASA to be honest, and now they have to be. And I mentioned just before the break about President Trump. If President Trump is aware of the question marks that have been raised about Apollo, and I see no reason why he shouldn't be, he's informed about many things, he has decreed or ordered that NASA should return to the moon by 2024, which coincidentally is the end of his second term, assuming he's re-elected. If they don't do it by then, he's going to call them out. If they then say, we want more money, we want more time, we've got to redesign this and do that, he's going to say, look, guys, you did it 9 times back in the 1960s with pretty inferior technology to what you've got available today. What's the problem? Get on with it. It can't be that difficult. Or if it is that difficult, did you really go the first time? Because they haven't got a lander decided yet. They haven't designed a spacesuit. This is the return to the moon in the Artemis program. They haven't tested the rocket, the SLS or the BFR, and they certainly haven't tested the heat shield, because that failed the first time they tried it back on Orion in December 2014. There's a lot of things to do, and they've got a increasingly short time in which to do it. I think they better get on with it, or questions are going to be asked, not just by President Trump, but by a lot of people around the world who want to see them succeed. I want to see them succeed. I would love them to succeed. I would love them to go back to the moon, photograph the Apollo 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, 17 landing sites and say, look, we got it the first time. Look, here are the pictures. You can prove that we did it the first time. I'd love that. I'd love that to happen. And if it does happen, I'll shut up and go away and do something else. But until they do that and provide definitive evidence, and please don't quote the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter photograph showing the landing sites allegedly on the lunar surface. Forget it. They're photoshopped. And you can prove it. Look at your own house on Google Maps, preferably one taken with an orbiting satellite. And I've looked at one. It's called the GOI-1 satellite. It orbits 640 kilometers above the Earth, 400 odd miles, filming through the Earth's atmosphere and distortion. And you can see individual cars on the road. You can see if it's got a sunroof, so you know which way the car's pointing. You look at your own house, you can recognize the features of it. Those Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter photographs were taken using similar equipment, defining 0.4 meters per pixel.
Right.
Same as the GOI-1 satellite. And you can't see a damn thing except a few blobs. Well, I don't believe it.
On that note, my friend, we have to get ready to say goodnight to you here because we are literally out of time.
Wow.
That went fast. And I appreciate you, Mr. Allen, for taking time to share with us on Spaced Out Radio. Thank you.
I'm delighted to be here. And anybody who wants to continue the discussion, just go on to nexusmagazine.com and you can contact me through there.
Perfect.
And if you want a lot of good information about this whole subject, go to Aulis, that's AULIS.com.
Coming up next, we have the SOR Newswire and the Thought of the Day. Stay tuned. Sorry about that, man. We ran out of time. I was too enthralled and forgot about the clock. Happens sometimes. My friend, Corey will reach out to you with an email if he hasn't already in your inbox there, and we'll get you booked in for September to talk some crop circles if you don't mind.
I'd love to.
Oh, we'd love to have you back. Yeah, let's give him a round of applause, YouTube chat. Give him a round of applause for Granddad Alan for coming on in and talking about the Apollo program. That's good stuff right there. We lucked out. Good job, Corrance, on this booking. Good job. Mr. Allen, thank you so much again.
No, I'm delighted to be able to do it. It's a fascinating subject, and I'm glad you and your audience find it as equally as interesting.
Yes, for sure. Can't wait to do it again, man. We'll talk to you in 2 months.
That'll be I look forward to that.
3 months. 3 months. Yeah, 3 months.
3 months. And if you've got anybody who wants to send me a message, just refer them to nexusmagazine.com, and if it's a polite question,
yeah, we got pretty good. We got pretty good at people that way.
That's good. No, that's great. Really pleased to be able to do that. And thank you for your generous invitation and your perceptive questions. I like that.
Thank you. We will we'll talk to you in 3 months and for crop circles, and you go enjoy your morning and enjoy the sunshine.
Thank you, Dave. I will certainly do that.
Take care, Take care, my friend. Bye-bye. Boy, if that didn't make you think, eh? Holy shit. Wow. That didn't make you think. Some pretty good observations. Now, I don't agree with them all. I don't. But it kind of put a few questions in my head. All right. Hey, SJ, how you doing, man? Gary the Spudger got your question in, buddy. All right. There we go. All right. I guess I got to prepare for the news here. I know we're going to hook up with Vancouver here momentarily. Just book it, Corey. You know pretty much the ones. Just follow the pattern of, August. Follow the pattern of July with those guests. Let's see here. Yeah, just throw up a bunch of dates. We'll get them in there. Oh, shit, I forgot about the news. Hold on. Hold your horses. Hold your horses. Hey, by the way, just so you know, I have to make a phone call after the show to talk about some UFO stuff. And so I'm going to have to bug out of the YouTube side early. And I do apologize because normally we like to hang out after the show and, do our thing that we normally do. And, unfortunately, sometimes business comes forward and comes first. And I got to get try and get some intel on this whole Wilson document thing. So this is a phone call that I have to take. Now, where the hell is Captain Shirk here? Oh, there she is. I don't know how many of these stories we're going to get in tonight, but we're going to do our best. We are going to do our best to get them in. Gary the Spudger. Oh, there's Vancouver. Hey, Vancouver, how you doing?
Hey, good, Dave. This is Ray, and I'm filling for Matt this week. So, ready to chat in a bit?
Yeah, my commercials end in 1 minute, 15 seconds.
Okay. Ours are ours are 1 minute, 1 minute and a half. And then we got a re-intro, so maybe it's like 1:45, something like that.
Okay, make sure I'm on hold because I got to reintroduce my show too, right? So.
Okay, I'll right now, and then when we're back, I'll just pot you up.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right, man.
If you've been waiting for the right time
Don't you love live radio?
Now our showrooms and service centers are open and routinely.
So you guys will hear the commercials. The radio side won't. That's where it's going to get a little cool.
Plus, right now you can finance a 2020 Corolla LE from 0.49% for 48 months. And you don't pay for 6 months when you finance most new Toyota models. So if you're in the market for a new Toyota, contact your local dealer or visit shoptoyota.ca. We're ready when you are.
It's 5:15. You're on your way home from a long day at work, or so you think. There's an accident just ahead of you. You have no other way to go. You are perturbed by this, but before your blood hits the boiling
All
point...
right, here we go on our side.
Hot sauce, available now at Kajan's.
Good night, Overbill.
Vancouver. With the largest fleet in Western Canada, Buster's can get to any accident or stall faster than anyone. Buster's Towing, 685-8181.
We've rounded third, and we're heading for home tonight on Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. We welcome you all back to tonight's show. We really do appreciate that.
Program. So we have a whole bunch of text messages.
We are about to go live in Vancouver, just so you know, as we talk once a week across Canada, talking about all sorts of strange, weird encounters, because that's what we do. That's what we do. You know, and that's what we're going to get to. Remember to follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio for the show. My personal handle at Dave Scott SOR, and of course, all of our YouTube channel stuff is free. That's where we store our archives. And go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. We'd greatly appreciate you doing that. We really do.
So we're going to try and
we're going to connect right now, or pretty quick here, with Vancouver. I think we're here.
There we go. Spaced Out Radio, Dave Scott.
How are you?
I'm Shane Hewitt, sitting in on the program tonight. Hello, Dave.
Shane, what's going on in Vancouver tonight, man?
Well, I'm actually in Calgary, Dave, so I'm on the other side of you. The rest of the crew is in Vancouver. We have a very important question before we get into all the magical stuff that you bring to the program.
Yeah, man.
I have a surprise question, so you have to get it right or we're going to hang up.
Okay. Works for me.
Dogs or cats? Which way would you go?
I'm sorry, you kind of cut out there.
Dogs or cats? Which one's better?
Dogs, man.
Okay, you're good.
Yeah.
Love this guy.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, I have two big dogs. You know what? I was out in the woods yesterday searching for Bigfoot because we got Sasquatch around here. And I took my little guy with me and my buddy, who is kind of our armed guard around the forest, because there's a lot of animals where I live in central BC that literally would love to eat you. And so we were looking around, and I found a wolf print, man, that was absolutely beautiful in the mud. And this wolf print was literally the size of my 6-year-old son's hand. And my buddy, who's been a hunting guide and a trapper and everything around those sorts for a number of years, he said that wolf would have been around 6 feet long and close to 200 pounds. I'm glad we didn't run into that. That is a big wolf. That is a very big wolf.
How big are your dogs?
I have a like a 80-pound German Shepherd and about a 90-pound German Shepherd cross. Yeah, my dogs wouldn't stand a chance.
Well, maybe the two of them together. I don't know. Hopefully, that's a big wolf. I had Great Danes, and when we used to sit on the couch, we used to be able to sort of hold their paw and interlock my adult male fingers into their toes. That's how big their paws were, but they don't sound as big as your wolf. That's pretty big.
I'm not going to lie. Your question scared me, and I'll tell you why. When I was trying to get into broadcasting school at BCIT back in 1996, a gentleman named Robin, who was one of the head instructors there at the time, he asked me a big pointed question. He goes, "You're a hockey guy. I know you want to either..." He goes, "I got a question for you." I said, "What's that?" He goes, "The Toronto Maple Leafs or the Montreal Canadiens? What do you think of the Habs? Love them or hate them?" And of course I said, hate them. He threw my resume on the floor and said, "Get out." And I'm sitting there stunned. The rest of the panel that we were interviewing with is killing themselves laughing. I'm almost crying because I said that I didn't like the Habs. You know, and thank goodness I got in. Thank goodness.
So I didn't mean to stress you out, Dave.
You stressed me out, my friend. What do you want to talk about? Some UFOs or some UFOs?
Well, I was thinking that maybe instead tonight we could talk about some UFOs. I thought that would be...
Let's do it. Let's do it.
I'm excited for this. I'm really excited for this. One of the things that I would imagine happens in your world, is that people feel like they can come share their experience, their story, what they saw or felt, and all the things they go through.
Yes.
But then there's probably some people that sort of recant that. They get to a point where they go, hey, you know what? I don't feel like I should have shared that. And then they start to pretend like, nah, man, I was just kidding. Does that happen in your world?
All the time. You know what? It usually goes along like this. It's like, oh, you don't believe in that stuff, do you? You don't believe in them aliens or UFOs? And then you say, yeah, yes, I do. Have you ever seen any of that? Well, yes, I have. Well, there was this one time, and then they look around, make sure nobody else is listening. There was this one time,
right,
when, a few years ago when I was, driving alone along the Saskatchewan prairie, waving at everybody in Canada and the United States. And there was these lights. And that's how it usually starts. And that's how it's kind of the truth, is when people come up to you real sheepishly and say, can I tell you something? I don't talk about this often, but this is just kind of the way it goes.
I like it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's cool. Tell me some stories. What do you got for us tonight,
all right,
Dave? I've been looking forward to this. I hear Drex talking about the pieces all the time, and so I'm really excited here.
All right. Well, we appreciate that. That's what we do here. We bring the woo to this show, man. All right. There is a huge controversy right now going on in the UFO world because a few months ago, there was these documents about a year ago that came out called the Admiral Wilson documents. Nobody knows how they really got out. They believe that they were part of the late Apollo astronaut, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who was the sixth man to walk on the moon, which is kind of ironic we're talking about this because my guest earlier tonight was all about, the Apollo landings didn't happen. Nobody's walked on the moon. So this is kind of funny, or ironic, I should say. So anyways, he talks about this gentleman named Admiral Wilson. And back in the day, they talked about these core secrets that Wilson was talking about, how they were covering up a lot of the dark suspicions of UFOs. And he was talking to a scientist by the name of Eric Davis, who is a physicist within a lot of the alphabet agencies in the United States. Now, recently, Mr. Davis has come out and said, yes, I had this conversation with Admiral Wilson in a private car in Las Vegas filled with military personnel and a military driver. Well, this past week, finally, Mr. Admiral Wilson came out and spoke. Thomas Wilson comes out and says, I wouldn't know Eric Davis if he walked in right now. Says it's all fiction. He's never talked to UFOs, doesn't know what the core secrets are, rejecting the entire premise of the meeting and the role. Basically pulling himself right out of the story. He's saying, and this is kind of the weird part, he says, I'm not saying that sometime, somewhere, I never met Mr. Davis, but I certainly don't know him, I don't remember him, and I definitely did not sit with him in a car for an hour in Vegas talking UFOs. Yes, this is where it gets strange, because he doesn't deny that UFOs aren't around. He just says he hasn't been privy to the information. So
when it gets suspicious and the changed stories, do you think is that somebody getting to them, or is that them chickening out?
I think it's chickening out, personally. I mean, the easiest way out of this, look, here's a prime example of what we're dealing with, and I think this is what we're dealing with in this situation as well. In April of last year, the Pentagon came out really astutely and quietly and said, yeah, we've been investigating UFOs for decades. And the mainstream media really didn't jump on that at all. I mean, that should be like throwing fresh meat into a cage full of hungry wolves. And we didn't do anything with it. We really didn't. We just, that's interesting. Look, the Pentagon is saying that they're talking about UFOs and they've been investigating this. But then, come December of last year, the Pentagon changes its story and denies it. No, we don't investigate UFOs. We're tired of this UFO talk. We want nothing to do with it. Why is it still here? Why are you still asking us? And the mainstream media didn't do a thing about it. We didn't do our jobs.
I remember it coming out, and I remember, nobody really, I mean, it kind of it was a bit of a throwaway, right? Like,
exactly.
Pentagon says everyone kind of went, oh, cool. And then that was it.
That's exactly it. And yet when they retracted and brought the denial forward in December, there was not one member of the mainstream media who went up to him and said, well, why did you say this back in April that you were? What is the story? I mean, it opens up so many questions, but this is really how, when we look at the mainstream media, the way everything kind of works with UFOs, it really shows a couple of things. Number one, the mainstream media does not know how to cover this topic. That is very, very clear. Number two, it also shows the lack of journalism that is really hurting our field right now, because I'm sure back in your day, back in my day, when we were on the beat, we're doing the reports, whether it was at a small station, going to city council meetings, or going to cover major stories around town or wherever it may be, we wanted to get a piece of it. We wanted to be the voice of that story. And now, one of the biggest stories in humankind's history, and we're not covering it. And the door is open, and then it's shut, and then it opens, and we do nothing with it. And that's the same thing with the Admiral Wilson documents. I mean, these are documents that literally say that the military has been looking into this phenomena. They know that there is contact being made. They know that there is some sort of connection between what the government knows, what we have studied, whether it's crash retrievals, whether it's alien bodies, and it's all right there. And no investigative journalist has really jumped down the throat of this to grab a hold of this story and run with it.
Wasn't that the same time? Wasn't there video evidence that was put out about the same time, too? That even makes that whole thing worse.
The videos came out a little bit earlier, about a year earlier, but it wasn't until this year where the United States Navy actually, declassified those 3 videos.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that makes it worse.
What are they?
Yeah. Okay, well, so if we're not going to believe what the government is saying in this particular case, or some people are not going to believe it. What about sightings? What's going on in the world of sightings? I mean, do we get them every day, every weekend? What's the latest on some updated? And I'm associated with a gentleman named Ryan Stacy, who runs a group out of Toronto called the Experiencer Support Association. And he feeds me a lot of these really cool stories that were coming on. So this one happened in Nova Scotia, and it is a daylight sighting of some strange lights. And this person, who remained anonymous, said it hovered above me for what seemed a few minutes, then slipped away across the sky without any sound, getting faster and faster until it was just poof, gone. This person says, I live in a trailer court located along a beach area. A dirt road ran down the center. On a summer afternoon, a friend and I were playing and ended up standing on the dirt road alone. I looked up and saw a series of concentric rings that looked like they were drawn perfectly with white chalk. It hovered among the clouds for a little while, and then it went in and out of these rings. It looked like flat drawn lines. I thought it looked like one of our stovetop burners. I didn't know what a UFO was back then. Then it left. My friend came running up saying he hadn't been able to find me for like 15 minutes, even though I thought I never moved from the road. He said he had checked the road and I wasn't there. So this person sees a UFO, sees some strange rings in the sky, has 15 minutes of missing time. Was this person abducted and then dropped right back in the exact spot? We hear this a lot with ET abductees. And now we continue the mystery. Well, it sounds like when he was looking up, that he could see it when he was looking up. Doesn't sound like the way you described it with the concentric rings, that it looked like it was, something that might not be seen unless he was right below it too, right?
Well, there's another theory and there's another theory about this too, with a lot of people who have had ET contact or UFO sightings, where they will be the ones, and they can see it just like you're looking up at the sun. They see a UFO, yet the same people around them will not be able to see it. It is one of the strange phenomena of this field that many are trying to figure out how that is happening, and more importantly, why is it happening? And is it only happening to someone who has been abducted by aliens, or is it a little bit more? We really do not know.
Parallel universe stuff, vibrational stuff, that people are more sensitive in different ways. Is it possible, or is there any talk about, some people are just more sensitive and they're seeing things differently, or some sort of access like that? I mean, people got to believe that aliens might not just be so tangible that they show up in a ship, but it's possible some parallel things going on.
Well, the other theory to that, too, is that these extraterrestrial craft have the ability to show themselves to the person whom they have interest in, and therefore can cloak out of the memories of other people around. I mean, how many times have we heard stories of people in Vancouver, Toronto, Seattle, New York, LA, who have UFO sightings, and their friends are like, well, I live next door, and I never saw a thing. I don't know what the hubbub is about that. I didn't see anything. I mean, maybe it's just those who live a happily boring life that don't get the fun and to get to play with the UFOs and the aliens. I have no idea.
I wouldn't know how you would be the one who wins that bingo. How do they choose you for that?
If we knew, we would be a hell of a lot closer to finding out some answers as to what is going on. The mysteries continue, my friend, and that's why we have shows like ours out there to try to figure out what the heck is going on in this strange planet that we call Earth.
I absolutely love it. Spaced Out Radio on the program, sharing the air with Dave Scott. Dave, the passion is great. The stories are great. Love the topic. And I love the fact that just ask the question, why? What did you see? What have you been told? What did you see? Thanks so much for sharing time today.
You take care. Thank you so much.
Dave Scott from Spaced Out Radio.
All right, we're going to continue on with the SOR Newswire. Let's get to it. The news is always changing, which is why we bring you the SOR Newswire at the back end of every show, where we get to the weird, the strange, the wacky, and let's get to the absolute sickening. I hate this contest. The organizers of the annual Nathan's Famous Hot Dog Eating Contest in New York say this year's event will go as planned. Yes, let the gluttony continue, but a private location will be in order. No fans allowed. Nathan's Famous and Major League Eating announced this past week that the contest, which is normally held on July 4th at Coney Island in New York, will take place amid the COVID-19 pandemic, but at a private location. The two 10-minute contests, one for men and one for women, will each only have 5 participants instead of the traditional 15 to abide by social distance guidelines. Workers will wear masks and gloves. They should have been for years. This contest is disgusting. And they will be all tested for coronavirus before they are able to compete. Last year's champions, Joey Chestnut and Miki Sudo, are both expected to defend their titles in the hot dog eating contest. Oh, yeah. And one more here before we get to the thought of the day. I feel sorry for this guy. He's been retired. The giant Galapagos tortoise, whose legendary libido has been credited with saving his species from extinction, has officially entered retirement. Diego and 14 other male tortoises have returned to their native Espanola, one of Ecuador's Galapagos Islands. The tortoises were put out to pasture Monday after decades of breeding in captivity on Santa Cruz Island. The breeding program was a success. More than 2,000 giant tortoises were born since it began in the 1960s. Diego, who's 100 years old, is thought to have fathered hundreds of progeny, around 40% of the island's 2,000 tortoises alive today by some estimates. This was one horny turtle. Good for him. He does, how do you retire from that? I don't even know. Do they get him a tortoise just for one final time? Who knows? Happy retirement, Diego. Your libido was awesome. Thought of the Dave happens every night at this time, where we ask a question on our Facebook and Twitter pages, then read your responses on the air because we love the audience participation around here. Today's Thought of the Dave is as follows. What's your thoughts on the Apollo moon landings? Tim, they did happen, and Buzz Aldrin is my mentor for throwing down with that reporter years back. Mark, I didn't used to question it, but lately I've found myself doing just that. I'm uncertain. Joanne says they happen. Grant, there's more to it than what the current narrative states. Alex, Aldrin punching that dweeb is the greatest act in American history. Bobby, knowing the technology of the time, it's a miracle that they pulled it off. Stephen, it's fake. Aldrin punched that guy because the truth hurt, in my opinion. William, perhaps the greatest single accomplishment of the human species, the belief by some that the lunar landings did not happen, testifies to the intelligence or lack thereof of those same individuals. One, I wholeheartedly agree with my friend William. Moreover, it's a darn shame that we never followed up. We could have had a significant presence there, which would have totally advanced science and technology significantly. Gail, trigger issue for any of us who watched The Eagle and the Astronauts July 20th, 1969 on TV. There's no words to describe history being made. John, I was both amazed and it made me proud to be American. I refuse to believe that it was just a psyop. Nick, I have plenty of tinfoil, but I believe they landed. I wonder if they really did see something watching them, and if so, hopefully they got pictures. Final one goes to, let's see here. Michael. Great accomplishment by mankind. Thank you to everybody participating in today's Thought of the Dave. We will do it all again. We'll go a little bit longer next time because this is an abbreviated version, but nonetheless a good version nonetheless. And we also say a big thank you to Captain Shirk for putting together a shortened but awesome SOR Newswire, and praising Diego the Tortoise. And of course, to Marcus Allen for talking about the Apollo landings. We have Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thal rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Special thanks to everybody listening in at home, in your cars, at work, wherever you may be. Thank you to everybody participating in our chat rooms on Spreaker, YouTube, LGAB, Revolution Radio, Facebook, our Space Travelers Club on our website, and to all the Starkers and Starkettes on Twitter at hashtag Spaced Out Radio. You were magnificent tonight.
I know you're out there somewhere.
Remember, this show is copyright by Spaced Out Radio and SOR Media Ventures Limited. Thank you so much for choosing to share your evening with us, because together, my friends,
we're watching.
We own the night. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. The Woo train has docked for the night, but it will race down the tracks again tomorrow. Remember, your seats are always available. Your tickets never expire. Tell your friends to come with us for a wild, wild ride. Good night. Solid show, everybody. Solid show. That's good stuff right there. Good stuff right there, everyone. Oh, yeah, you guys make me proud, you sexy motherfuckers. All right, maybe I shouldn't say that, but I don't care. I just did. I don't know why I'm just so friggin' energized right now. This is just amazing. I should be tired as anything. I don't know. I just don't know. Let me see if my phone call is available. Hold on here. Watch you for so long, wait for you to fall. We'll suppose you won't. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. Hey, 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 do, 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 do. Hey, 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 do, 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 do. Oh, where's that one go? That one, where is my... Where are you? Oh, for Christ's sake, I can't find my recycle bin. Well, we're just going to delete that. Move that, and we're going to delete that one too. Fuck 'em. There we go. There we go. I don't know what's going on here. I don't know when Bumblefoot will be back on. I do not know. Oh, let me get this opened up here. And let's go here. And we'll start the download. If this person now all of a sudden isn't awake, I'm going to be pissed off. Pissed off. Well, not really, because I still get to chat with you guys. But, you know, that's always cool. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. Okay, while this is downloading, I'll be right back. All right. I shall be right back. Give me a few. All right, YouTube. I have got my phone call that I have to take right now, so I'm going to log off with you guys tonight. Hey, Fapster, how you doing? I appreciate all of you guys being here. Tomorrow night on the show, we are going to have Merle, and we're talking about ghosts of Winnipeg, Manitoba. We got a great author for you, and I'll keep his name a secret right now, but I'll introduce you to him tomorrow night. I want to say thank you all for tuning us on in. Thank you to Cable Guy Matt and Bigfoot Michigan Rob for the super chats tonight. Much love to all of you, and we'll see you tomorrow. I apologize for cutting this off short tonight, but I got to take this call. I just have to. We'll talk to you guys soon, and thank you. Much love. We'll